discussion and debate, atheism, evolution, Bible study, prophecy, and doctrine, social issues, and everything Christian. These are Hot Topics with your host, Eric, a.k.a. Wolf. Welcome. And hello, how you doing today? Thank you very much for joining me. This is Eric, a.k.a. Wolfbitten. This is Hot Topics, and welcome. Today, we're going to do something a little bit interesting. Today, I'm going to give to those who make themselves my enemy, those who hate me, those who have not earned the right. I'm going to give them the right to grill me. That's right. You can grill me today. Now, those of you who may be tuning in for the first time, let me explain a little something here. And hello there. Hello to Kevin. Hello to Kirsten. How you doing? God bless you. Thank you guys for showing up. Yeah, I've got several friends who, well, I'll call them friends, who wanted to debate me at one time, and we don't see eye to eye on things, and that's okay. Not all people do. And I invited them to debate, and all of a sudden, they didn't want to debate. They had a hard time debating. And they call themselves Nemesis, and I have to laugh at that. I really do, because it's a cute name for people who can't debate. And instead of debating, they chose to begin mass reporting. I'm on my second 30-day. 30 days in jail with Facebook because of Nemesis now, and that's cool too. Like I said, I couldn't care less, really. What I find odd is the nickname Nemesis when their superpower is mass reporting. At any rate, I have agreed. I've brought several of them on to discuss evolution, abiogenesis, atheism, etc. I did bring one on, Kirsten, because she was polite and a sweet personality. And she asked if she could come on and talk about my Christianity. I said, sure. So I brought her on. We had a pleasant conversation. But the rest of these guys, my goodness, it really hasn't been a pleasant experience, I will say. But to be quite honest, I think most of them have been pretty much embarrassed, and that's the reason I get things like this from Facebook. Uh-oh. 2 of your messages have not met community standards, so I ended up doing another 30 days in Facebook jail. Now, what did I say that was so horrible that I got? The funny thing is, the things I could have reported me for weren't reported. I got reported for telling somebody that I've been patient with their group for far too long, and they were trying my patience. Oh my gosh. And now they're officially challenged. Yes, that's right. 30 days in jail, Eric. Uh-oh. Connor McLeod, the wannabe Highlander. You're about as bright as a busted bulb, kid. Bullying! Bullying! Yes, I got 30 days in Facebook jail for bullying. Now, if they think that's bullying, they can thank God they didn't come up when I was a kid or go to the school I went to. My goodness. They would know what bullying is. Because you're a bully, calling somebody a moron. Oh my gosh. That's not why I was given 30 days in jail, you moron. You are a moron. You are not a Christian. And you're not an intelligent person. But, that's okay. My Christianity is for God to judge, not you, sweetheart. Now, the reason I'm here... Hello, Vincent. Welcome, buddy. The reason I'm here is because Connor, Jordan, and a few other of these guys, they keep saying, prove your God, prove your God, prove your God, every single time they've come up here to try to debate me on evolution and abiogenesis and failed. Prove your God, prove your God. Then they make demands. They make demands, expecting to come on. But today, I'm going to show some kindness to my friends here. Hello, guys. Glad you're in the audience. And I am going to give you what you want. But we have some rules today. We have some rules. Here's the rules. I'm going to give you proof for God. Okay? I'm going to give you my personal proof for God. And I'm going to give you scientific proof for God. Scientific proof that can't be denied. Can't be proven wrong. It's falsifiable. It's testable. And it's repeatable. And every single time it's tested, it proves true. You cannot prove it wrong. Unlike you, where every single one of your theories just fall right through the roof. You can't prove yours right. You won't be able to prove mine wrong. So, here's the rules, guys. That's right, Vincent. It will be, I can promise you. Here's the rules, fellas. Anybody that wants to debate this, anybody that wants to ask me a question, I'm going to give you a link. I'm not going to place you on mute, unless, of course, you start cursing and yelling and screaming and acting like a 3-year-old with no upbringing. Now, if you would like to come up here and ask me any question at all, I will bring you on. You can ask your question, and then I will answer you. If you want the scientific proof of God, you will get it today. Amen, Kevin. That's all I'm asking. Be respectful. Understand that some of us have families. Some of us have children. And we're trying to expose them to good things, not bad things. Atheist girl, you can disagree with me all you like. You just can't act like an idiot on air. Do you understand that? If you start acting like an idiot, yes, you're going to be booted backstage until you calm down, and then I'll bring you back out. It's that simple. But as long as you're asking questions, making points, trying to prove me wrong, you're free to talk all you like. No, sweetheart, that's you. That's your group who mass reports things like You're about as bright as a busted bulb, kid. Or I've put up with your group for far too long, and now you're officially challenged. You have to mass report things like that because you can't win a debate, okay? Because you get hateful. You get unreasonable. You're childlike. So, I don't see anybody backstage yet. If you'd like to come backstage, come on back. Now, Atheist Girl, I'm just going to quiet you right now. There you go. See, you're not here to ask questions. You're not here for scientific proof of God. You're here to act like an idiot. So, you get to be quiet. I'm going to tell you something. When I see actions like that, McLeod, I see you backstage here, but your devices aren't hooked up. It says device is not connected. You're going to have to connect at least your microphone to come on. Well, I'm about to, Vincent. Nobody has come back to ask me yet. Okay. Now, McLeod's back here. I can show you. But you see, this says that his devices are not connected. So I can't bring McLeod back here. And there he is again. Okay, McLeod, you're not showing up. Well, you're showing up, but your devices are not connected. There you go. Okay.
Hey, am I on?
Yeah, there you are. How you doing?
I'm all right. How are you doing, Eric?
I'm doing okay.
That's good to hear.
Okay, now I imagine you're coming back to ask for some scientific evidence for God. Is that true?
Well, yeah, it is. Yeah.
Okay. Well, welcome, and I'm glad you're here. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm glad to have you on. Now,
thank you.
There's a lot of scientific evidence for God. We're just trained.
There isn't.
Oh yeah,
Eric,
we're just trained to not to see it.
Okay.
Have you ever heard? Now, you see, this is not just entirely your fault, but this is what's crammed into your head from school and society. You hear, for instance, all the time about the theories, hypotheses of evolution and abiogenesis.
No, Eric.
Hold on.
This is not about evolution. Eric.
You
are going down the same road again. This is not about evolution.
You're going backstage a second. Now quit interrupting. I'm giving you the evidence for God. You've got to allow me to introduce the subject, kid. Now I'm bringing you back on. So give me the opportunity to introduce the subject. You hear all the time in school about evolution and abiogenesis, but you never hear about the science called Biogenesis. Now, I'd like for everybody to Google the term biogenesis. What does biogenesis mean? I'm sure you have. I'm sure you have Google.
Are you just going to just waffle on?
What are you talking about?
Oh,
I was
no,
beginning to.
No, Eric.
No, don't. No, you're backstage again. I told you I'm beginning to give you the evidence right now. Now, here we come. The evidence is called biogenesis. That's just part of the evidence. Biogenesis is an actual science. Biogenesis is older than the theory of evolution. As a matter of fact, Louis Pasteur is said to have solidified the field of biogenesis and falsified what used to be known as spontaneous regeneration and what later became abiogenesis. Now, what does biogenesis mean? Biogenesis is the hypothesis, the theory that inanimate objects,
Eric,
do not bring forth life.
Eric, you are going back onto your little statements, your little fucking...
There you go. It's cussing already. Backstage, kid. And no, I'm not going back on anything. You're not being patient and listening, McLeod. Highlander. Okay, biogenesis states... Biogenesis... Off air again. Biogenesis states that only life can bring forth life. Only something that was living can bring forth life. Biogenesis states further that everything brings forth after its own type. In other words, after its own kind. Now, if this is true, I didn't say it is the same as abiogenesis, Vincent. Listen, fella, what I said was abiogenesis was what spontaneous generation later morphed into. It's the same principle that life can come forth from things that didn't ever live before. As a matter of fact, abiogenesis states that life just falls together. Cells just fell together. They just randomly formed while their DNA inside them randomly formed, and then they just popped to life. That's what abiogenesis states. Now, the theory of biogenesis says this. The theory of
Eric.
McLeod.
Are we just going to listen to you ramble on again?
Okay, well, you can listen backstage if you're going to keep interrupting. Biogenesis states that only life brings forth life. Only conscious intelligence brings forth a conscious intelligence. It doesn't randomly form, and non-living items do not bring forth life. Now,
Eric, I'm
gone. Did you get to hear that, McLeod? Did you get to hear the definition?
No, because you keep muting me.
Well, you keep interrupting.
Because you're funny. Like the rest of them.
You keep interrupting.
No. You try.
I have explained three times. I have explained 3 times what biogenesis is, and you're talking right through it every single time. So now I'm going to add you one more time, and I'm going to explain to you one more time, McLeod, what biogenesis is. Biogenesis states it's a hypothesis. You can Google it and tell me if I'm lying or telling you the truth. Biogenesis states a few things. First of all, depending on the definition that you're going to, some are worse than others, some are better than others. Biogenesis states that life does not randomly form and spring to life from non-living materials. Non-life cannot bring forth life. Only.
Just listen, Eric.
Hold on, I'm not finished with the definition, McLeod. Okay. Man. So, you see how infantile this guy is? He can't even listen to the definition, and then he has to say, well, you didn't give me the definition. You're not giving me proof of God. How childish can you be, son? Listen, if I hate to do this, but if mom and dad didn't teach you nothing, I'm going to teach you something. You don't come on air acting like an idiot. So I'm going to bring you on one more time, and I'm going to try to explain this to you one more time, and then I will take your questions, okay? So calm yourself down, catch your breath, and I'm going to bring you on. Here you go. Okay, there we are again. Let's try it one more time, McLeod. So if you look at the definition of biogenesis, you see that it is the theory that non-life cannot bring forth life. Only life can bring forth life. Only, and then life brings forth after its own type or kind. Now, if this is true, then that means the very first life had to be brought forth from a life. Biogenesis proves, if it is true, then there's a God. There is a life that brought forth the first life on earth. So, and it also proves that this life has a consciousness and an intelligence, because consciousness and intelligence only comes forth from consciousness and intelligence. That is the theory of biogenesis.
Hang on a minute.
Now,
I need another beer.
Now,
go on then.
How many times a day is biogenesis proven true? Well, let's check this out. Biogenesis is proven true every single time a cell divides. Every single time a living cell divides through mitosis. How many billions of times a day does this happen?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
I just blanked you. I didn't even know what you was on about. Because you're not listening. Because you're not listening to anybody else.
Hold on. I'm not listening. I'm the one not listening.
You're not listening, Eric.
You can't tell me what I just asked. You can't answer the question I just asked you, and you tell me I'm not listening.
Eric, we are here to discuss your God. I'll discuss him, and if you can prove to me your God,
take your time.
I'll believe in him.
Take your breath.
I will believe in him. Now do it.
I've been doing that. Have you not heard this? Have you not heard a single word of? Have you? All right. Goodbye, Connor. Connor's gone, and he's not coming back on. So he can't refrain from cussing. He can't even listen to the evidence that's being given to him. That's the brain this kid has. That's the civility this kid was raised with. And this is the guy that is, quote, defending science, unquote, with Nemesis. This is the brain level. Kirsten, take a good look, because you're not like this, honey. You have manners, intelligence, you're a sweet person, you're easy to talk to. And this is the caliber of person that everybody else in your group is. Everybody. I don't see a civil one among them. I don't see one that's capable of a conversation. Okay, but here we go. If anybody else wants to come on and ask anything, you are able to come on and ask. You're able to, if you're able to be civil. How many chances did I give Connor? My goodness. And Connor's still sitting backstage. You're not coming back on, bud. Not at all. You're sitting there drinking, acting like a fool. Okay? You won't even listen to the evidence. And then you say, you're not giving me no evidence. I came here to talk about your God. You're not. I'm sorry, dude. I didn't want to do that to you. So, Biogenesis states, and you can Google this, I'm not lying to you. Biogenesis states it is a principle, it is a hypothesis, and it's proven right. It goes through the falsification process billions of times every single day. And it is proven correct without exception. It has never been proven untrue, nor will it ever be proven untrue. And yet, it's tested every single day. Now, let me put these side by side. On one hand, you have the Christian claim that only life brings forth life, and it brings forth after its own kind. Only intelligence and consciousness brings forth conscious intelligence, and is proven right every single time. On the other hand, you have abiogenesis, which proves untrue every single time, but it stipulates that this is what the atheist has to believe now. You have to. You don't have a choice. This is your go-to. Abiogenesis says that life just randomly formed. It just fell together and popped to life and began eating and multiplying. And then somehow this single-celled organism did the impossible again. It didn't just randomly form itself and pop to life. Somewhere down the road, it divided into a male. And the other half of it randomly formed into a female. How'd that happen? That's something else you'd never see happening today. You can't make it happen in a laboratory. And yet, you have to believe that's what happened. So you have these two competing theories side by side. Abiogenesis and biogenesis. Now, every single time today a cell divides, every act of mitosis proves that there's a God. Why? Because it proves the hypothesis true, that it takes a life to create a life. And it proves the hypothesis true, that it brings forth after its own kind every single time. That's what biogenesis postulates. Now, every single time an egg hatches, it doesn't matter what logic supports abiogenesis. Anybody can say anything, kid, and call it logic. What matters, Vincent, is what you can prove in a laboratory through testing. Abiogenesis never proves true. Never. Now, you put abiogenesis next to biogenesis. On one hand, biogenesis is true and proves true every single time an act of mitosis takes place. Now, how many times a day does a cell divide, Vincent? How many times a day does a cell divide? How many billions of times? Each one of those times is a test that proves abiogenesis false and proves biogenesis true. Now, let's look at eggs. How many times does an egg hatch every day and bring forth life? I'm not just talking about birds or snakes or reptiles. Look at roaches. Look at spiders. Eggs hatch hundreds and thousands at a time. Every single time an egg hatches, it proves that biogenesis is true, and it disproves abiogenesis. Look at the live birth and how many eggs hatch every day. Think about that. How many eggs hatch every day across the world? Roach eggs, spider eggs, chicken eggs. Every single one proves that there's a God, proves that biogenesis is true. Every single one proves that abiogenesis is untrue and that the atheist is wrong. Look at live births. Every single one proves there's a God, because it proves that only life can bring forth life, and it brings forth after its own kind, and it proves that abiogenesis is false. So, when you put these two sciences side by side, hands down, the atheist loses. Hands down, the theist wins. Because science proves me right. Every single one of the Christians here, science proves us right. Science does. This isn't me talking. This is a literal science. Biogenesis is a scientific hypothesis that's proven absolutely right billions of times every single day. And those same billions of times every single day prove the atheist wrong. And that's just something you've got to take. Now, if you're going to defend science, Nemesis, defend that. Because that's what science says. That is science. That's what science proves. Now let's talk about another line of science that proves God. Another line of science that proves God is this. Astrophysics. What in the world do I mean astrophysics? Look, most of you Nemesis members, you don't have the first idea about the history of the evolution, pardon my pun, the evolution of the history of the universe, the evolution of our hypotheses regarding the universe. You see, it used to be a very long time ago, many decades ago, before you were born, a Christian, a Catholic, developed the hypothesis of the Big Bang. Now, some of you will say, oh, well, the Big Bang proves there's no God. How's that? The Big Bang proves that the Bible was right. The Big Bang proves that God says, I flung out the stars. Now, then you go on to the Big Bang. Vincent, I see you backstage. I'll bring you out in just a minute, buddy. The Big Bang kept getting falsified, though. What falsified the Big Bang? Two little things called flatness and horizon. Now, what are flatness and horizon? Flatness is the observation that the universe appears to be a flat disc-like structure, not a ball. And they didn't know how to explain this, because if there's a Big Bang, it should have banged into a ball. But it didn't bang into a ball. And then a little thing called horizon. Horizon is basically the fine-tuning of the universe, because anything more in one direction and it would have expanded out into space forever and quickly. and life wouldn't have formed any less, and it would have crunched back in on itself in a big crunch. So flatness in the horizon kept falsifying the Big Bang. So one day in 1980, Dr. Alan Guth came out with his paper on the eternal expansion, eternal inflation, aka chaotic inflation. And he says, God bless you too. Dr. Alan Guth, in his paper on eternal inflation in 1980, says, I'm going to attempt to explain the problem with flatness and why we don't have a ball-like structure for a universe, but rather a flattened one. He says it could possibly be that a super fast, superheated expansion far beyond the speed of light, and so super hot you can't imagine it. That is what he suggests began, and then all of a sudden, for some reason, it mysteriously put on the brakes but continued to expand. But the deceleration, the decelerated rate of expansion, allowed it to cool down the universe, cooled down enough for it to just suddenly collapse in on itself after that great heat. He said it's a beautiful idea, but the math just isn't working out, so we're going to have to modify this idea. A lot of people loved it. A lot of people hated it. It wasn't even considered science at the time. So 2 years later, after conferring with several other theoretical scientists, they came back out with that same theory, only this time it was wrapped in string theory. And they say, okay, we got it now. But still, it was being... And Vincent, I'll bring you on in just a moment, buddy, I promise you. But at this moment, it was still being ridiculed because it wasn't testable. So a few years later, even though they couldn't directly test the hypothesis, they could test some of the predictions about the hypothesis. And CERN, that great big thing in Europe there, particle accelerator in Europe, CERN was able to test for supersymmetry back in 2013. And they tested twice and it failed. And you can still find the articles about that failure. Supersymmetry fails at CERN. Now we're going to need a new theory of everything. Supersymmetry fails. So then, in 2015, they got to test it again and again and again, and it failed again and again and again. So then they began to say, okay, well, we know how to fix this. And what we're going to do is this. We notice that there is a force in the universe that fixes all this. We don't know what this force is, but it's there. We see what it does. This force is invisible. It's omnipresent. There isn't a place in this universe that this force doesn't exist. This force is omnipotent over the universe because it's expanding the universe and at the same time holding the universe together. The funny thing is, this force that they say they observe in the universe is the same force that God says he exerts over the universe 3,500 years before we knew anything about dark matter and dark energy. Why do they call it dark matter and dark energy? Because they don't know what it is. God forbid any of them suggest that this is God that they've detected. They would be drummed out. But I'll tell you what, 3,500 years ago, with no way of knowing, God declared to these writers, I am stretching out the universe. I am stretching it forth like a curtain. Present tense. Colossians chapter 1 says, it's God that's holding all of this universe together. And now we observe that if it wasn't for this mysterious, invisible, omnipresent force, the galaxies would fly apart. Something is mysteriously holding them together. So absolutely every attribute of this force that they actually observe and use to fix all the problems with the Big Bang and an eternal expansion and string, absolutely every one of these are attributes that are claimed by God 3,500 years ago, my friend. So there you have two lines of science. Now, Vincent wants to talk about biogenesis. So, Vincent, I'm going to bring you on, buddy. And here we go. How you doing, Vincent? Good to see you.
I'm not doing too bad, thank you.
Well, good to have you on. Now, you wanted to ask about biogenesis.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to talk about physics as well, but I'd just like to go back to your misunderstanding of biogenesis and how it fits into the sort of historic scientific process. So biogenesis was produced as a direct response to the initial ideas of spontaneous generation, which was that dead matter or inanimate matter could spontaneously and instantly produce life. So flies appearing from dead meat, that kind of thing. And biogenesis was developed, derived, observed as a current scientific idea that refuted that, because we don't see
and how do you
immediately and spontaneously creating higher forms of life.
Right, you don't see anything spontaneously creating higher forms of life. So yes. how do I misunderstand biogenesis?
Because you seem to think that it's a constant law that applies all the time across the history of the universe, whereas actually it's only something that we've observed as humans.
Can you show me
existed?
Can you show me where it doesn't apply?
We don't know. We don't know its limitations because we have only observed it now.
Can you show me where it doesn't prove true?
It doesn't prove true in dead things.
What do you mean in dead things?
It is only applicable to currently living things.
Biogenesis, where does it prove wrong?
It doesn't prove anything wrong. It's an observation that currently living things produce other living things.
And you say currently?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because we have no idea in history. We know that at some point the Earth didn't have any life.
Right.
Past.
Right.
And then later on it did.
Okay.
So in some way, life has to have got started.
So where do you think I misunderstand biogenesis?
Because you seem to think it's universally applicable.
Where isn't it?
You seem to think that it refutes the modern concept of the sort of chemical biological abiogenesis.
Well, it does.
No, it doesn't.
Of course. How?
Because it's only a current observation of living things.
Okay. Now, where is your current observation of abiogenesis ever proving true?
We don't have it at the moment because
you don't
happened in the past. And
how do you know?
The same conditions.
How do you know?
Because at some point in the past there was no life on Earth, and now there is.
And so
that life has to have started at some point.
That means life just poof randomly fell together, huh?
No.
That okay, right. So what are we saying?
It wasn't random. It's a chemical biological process.
Of course it's random. Just like evolution is said to be random.
No, evolution is semi-random.
Of course, it's all entirely random. Random mutation.
Mutation is random.
Okay,
natural
there you
selection
go.
Is not random.
Well, why isn't natural selection random?
Evolution covers both of them.
Okay, so you have something. Abiogenesis is things that just randomly combined.
No.
Oh, you mean okay? Who designed it?
Nobody designed it.
Then who put it together? The first life. Who put it together?
If I drop something,
yeah,
and it falls, is that a random behavior?
Who dropped something?
Anything. If something falls off a shelf,
right?
It's a random behavior that it falls downwards.
With abiogenesis, who dropped something?
I'm not asking that. Is that a random behavior? Is that physical act of something dropping under gravity? Is that random?
If something drops, is it random?
Yeah.
I guess
if you drop something, is it going downwards under the force of gravity? Is that a random thing? Or does it always do that?
Or something always comes down.
Yeah.
Something always drops.
The law of gravity
if anything,
is a scientific law that happens. It's not random because we know the law that.
Okay, well, what is the scientific? You're suggesting that abiogenesis is a scientific law.
No, but it includes them. There seems to be reasonable. Yeah, there seems to be reasonable evidence for that.
How?
We know, for example, that there are complex molecules that will spontaneously, or not spontaneously, but that will self-create and self-replicate.
Like what?
Like things like RNA.
Randomly.
We know that these things randomly what?
They randomly combine.
No, they don't randomly combine. They interact under the laws of chemistry.
Okay, well, what I'm asking you is this, Vincent. Where do you see abiogenesis taking place?
Where?
Yeah,
I have
where?
No idea. Somewhere on the surface or underneath the earth, probably.
Probably. You see, you have no evidence whatsoever that this is even possible.
We have evidence, which we've already discussed, that at some point in the past, there wasn't life, and now there is.
Well, that's not evidence of abiogenesis. That's evidence that life occurred.
Exactly. That's what abiogenesis means.
Abiogenesis becomes your hypothesis regarding the observation that we now have life.
No. Abiogenesis is life appearing.
Are you saying abiogenesis
by any means?
Are you? Okay. No, it isn't.
So if you
are you saying?
If you have a theistic theory of God creating life from dust, say, that's abiogenesis still.
No, that's not abiogenesis. Abiogenesis is the theory, the hypothesis that life combined randomly. And first of all,
no, it's not random.
Of course it is. Have you ever heard of Sir Hoyle? Fred Hoyle, yeah. Okay. Do you know what Fred Hoyle says about abiogenesis? He
says a lot of things, but
Fred Hoyle was
an astrophysicist. It's not really very.
He was not just an astrophysicist. He was also a one of the greatest mathematicians that ever lived, and he was very much a biologist. Now, whether he had any degrees or not in biology, I don't know, but he was certainly working in that field, and he was working in that field with other men. Now, Sir Fred Hoyle said, now, he didn't believe in abiogenesis. He was totally dead set against it. And do you know what he actually likened it to? Do you know what he actually believed, first of all?
Wasn't he the guy that came up with the junkyard idea?
Yeah, but do you know what he actually believed, though, regarding life on Earth?
Not offhand.
No. He believed in panspermia. He said, he said that abiogenesis was a ridiculous idea. He said it was mathematically impossible. Now, he describes this combination of material as random. And he is the one that came up with you were right about the junkyard thing. He says that abiogenesis would be like a tornado coming through a junkyard and blowing together a 747 jet, complete with everything it takes to run it. Now, but it's worse than that. Because then...
But isn't he making the same mistake that you just did?
No, because...
In assuming that it happened instantly.
No. Well, hold on. We'll get to that.
It didn't happen instantly.
Hold on. Let me finish.
There wasn't like 1 second...
Well, let me finish
chemicals,
this.
Next second, cells.
Let me finish this thought and we'll get to that. It's worse than that. It's worse than a 747 just randomly blown together in a junkyard from a tornado. Now, how impossible is that?
It's improbable.
You don't think it's impossible?
No.
I do. I think that it's ridiculous to think it's not impossible.
Over what time span?
Over any time span. And
over an infinite time
further, it's worse than what he said. Because then your jet plane that just randomly threw together through a tornado, because of a tornado, it's got to pop to life. And then it's got to develop the capacity before it pops to life of feeding itself and multiplying itself. That's how ridiculous it is.
Except the first life wouldn't have done any of those things.
The first life wouldn't have done what?
It wouldn't have done the eating things, absorbing perhaps, but it wouldn't have had any kind of digestive system. It wouldn't have had any kind of separate reproductive system. We're talking about fairly basic chemicals here that can self-replicate.
Okay, so how did life just randomly pop together and just pop to life?
It didn't do it randomly. This is the thing.
Well, how did it happen at all?
If you mix a couple of chemicals in a beaker, then you know what comes out. If you mix sodium and chloride, you know you get salt. That's a chemical law that these things combine in that way.
You're just talking in circles right now. What I'm asking is, how did life just pop to life?
Are you asking how what we currently define as life arose?
Yes.
How do you define life?
How did it just pop to life? How do we define life?
What are you defining as life?
The same way Craig Venter defines life. If you don't know what life is, bud, you're in the wrong conversation.
Because actually, it's quite a complex.
Question.
We don't know for certain.
Hold on a second, Vincent.
Life.
Hold on a second. That's bullcrap. Now, Richard Dawkins, Craig Venter, and several other scientists, I can take you right now to their 45-minute long discussion on life and the origins of life. Okay, they didn't sit there saying, "Well, what is life? Life is complicated. We don't know what life is." Okay. And they were going with the assumption that everybody knows what life is. And they talked about life. And they talked about how did it arise. And you know what they said? That we don't know. That was the answer. We don't know. You know what else they said? They were asked right there during this panel discussion, 45-minute panel discussion, do you think we will ever know the vehicle by which non-life became life within our lifetimes? Richard Dawkins, of course, says, well, having sat through this conference, I'm quite sure. I feel very confident that before our lifetimes are over, we will understand the vehicle by which non-life became life. They don't have the slightest idea. Craig Venter, on the other hand, says, I don't think we'll ever know. So, it's not like we have to sit here and wonder what is life. We know what life is. So now what I'm asking you is
we don't know what life is, though. We've got some ideas.
Maybe you don't know. Okay, well, you don't know what life is. I'll accept
biologists.
that. No,
this is a general thing. There's no single definition of life.
They didn't seem to have that problem. So here we go. Here we go, Vincent.
Like 6 or 7
okay, so when I ask you how did life occur, you say we don't know what life is. Is that your answer?
No, I was asking you for your definition of it.
I'm asking you to get past the definition. I'm asking you to get past the definition of life. And just hold on, you're interrupting me, Vincent. I'm asking you to tell me the hypothesis of how life began, according to you. Your hypothesis. What hypothesis do you believe?
Well, I don't have a hypothesis.
Okay, so you don't have the slightest idea.
Hypotheses, and I understand them.
So do you
I personally don't do biological research.
Okay, so do you have the slightest idea of what the hypothesis of abiogenesis states regarding the origin of life?
That it came from basic chemicals that self-replicated and interacted with their environment to build up to most of the sort of 6 or 7 criteria that we have for something being alive.
Okay, now how did that happen?
Chemistry.
Why don't we see it today?
Because we don't have the same conditions.
Why can't they do it in the laboratory?
Because we don't know what those conditions were.
Well, they can create any condition they want in a laboratory.
But they don't know what the conditions were.
They often do.
There's a lot of research on it. I mean,
are you saying
there are some famous experiments that produce amino acids and things? So we have a vague idea.
Do you know what spectrometry is?
Spectrometry.
Yeah. Do you know what it is?
Yes.
Okay. Now, we have the ability to go back as far as we want. And we say, okay, we believe that this is the rock layer that tells us life began here. So they can take that to the spectrometer, and they can examine these rocks, and they can know what the conditions were. So that's an excuse.
Not really. No, I mean that just gives you a broad idea of what the conditions were. It tells you what was there. It doesn't tell you things like what chemicals were interacting in that environment.
So basically, Vincent, you don't have anything. You don't have the slightest idea how it began. You don't have the slightest
chemistry.
No. You're throwing out a guess. I might as well say the wind.
No, I'm saying for certain it was chemistry.
No, you don't know that for certain, Vincent. Of
course
you don't.
Prior to that, it was physics.
Because you can't
get more complex. It's chemistry.
No.
And then once this idea of life
hypothesis,
comes in, we have biology.
Vincent, your hypothesis. Vincent, what is the difference between a hypothesis and a guess?
A hypothesis is stated in such a way that it can be falsified.
There you go. Now, what's the hypothesis of abiogenesis?
The falsification for abiogenesis is that
what is the hypothesis of abiogenesis?
That life arose.
How?
That's it. That's the hypothesis of abiogenesis.
That is not the hypothesis. Vincent, come on. That's not the hypothesis.
Life arose, and we're exploring.
No. So it doesn't say that life arose through chemical recombinations.
Yeah.
Okay. Now
that's one of the hypotheses that's been.
Once you piled up all these building blocks to life, how did it pop to life?
Well, we haven't defined what that border is yet.
How did it become a living thing?
Chemistry.
How?
Chemistry.
How? Air, wind, rain.
Chemical molecules interacting.
How did it just pop to life? Okay,
Well,
show me.
Just pop. This
Okay, hold on, Vincent. Show me anything today. Show me anything where you can create some chemical process, create some blob of anything, and it just pops to life.
No, it doesn't just pop to life.
Right, there's a chemical process.
I don't understand why you keep saying that.
You are claiming because it just popped to life somehow.
No.
Of course it did. No. Are you saying it just laid there dead the entire time and never popped to life?
So you understand the definition of species, yeah? Species are groups that interbreed.
Right, and produce fertile offspring.
So as they evolve, if that population splits and they start evolving separately, there will be a time where they can still interbreed. Yeah? Is that a reasonable idea?
What I'm at, you're not even touching the question.
No, I'm not. I'm producing an analogy, if you let me.
No. I want you to answer the question.
I am answering the question.
No, what is the process?
Like you do, I have to lay down the foundations first.
What is the process by which something lays there non-living? Well, it is a randomly combined cell.
This is what I'm getting to.
Hold on. Listen to the question. You have a randomly combined cell. A cell just evolved out of nowhere, randomly. Okay?
That didn't happen.
Now, then you can't have abiogenesis.
No. This is what I'm saying. This is what you're misunderstanding.
It's not my misunderstanding, kid. Listen.
You're skipping over.
I'm not skipping over anything. Okay, you're saying.
Allow me the time.
Let me explain to you what you're saying to put this in a nutshell for everybody, because you are a mess right now, buddy. You're saying that the process by which something became a cell was through evolution. This cell went through this
concept of evolution. Yes.
Okay, there you go. This over time. This stuff randomly combines and it almost creates a cell, but then it don't. And so later on, it almost creates a cell again, but it don't. And later on, it almost creates a cell again,
you
but
seem
it don't.
To be very linear in your thinking, Eric.
No, that's what you're saying.
No.
Okay, that's what you believe. And then you say...
if you let me say what I'm saying, then you'll know.
Okay, go ahead. Okay. You have a minute.
To go back to my analogy with species, okay? Population splits and they go on their merry way for a few generations. For some time, they will still be able to interbreed. At some point down the line, they won't. There'll be some reason, whether it's selection of some kind, whether it's sexual selection or mutations or whatever. There'll be a point where some of one generation can't interbreed with some of one generation from the other half of the population. And as that goes on, they grow more and more apart. Yeah. Same with life. We have this thing where chemistry will build up. Chemistry builds up more and more complex molecules. RNA, which we both agree isn't alive, but it can replicate. It doesn't have all the other criteria necessary for being life, though. And then we have more complex, we have things like DNA and other vastly more complex molecules, which are still not life. But the interaction between them, at some point, we start defining as being alive. So that's things that can grow in some way, have a metabolism perhaps. But there's sort of half a dozen different criteria like that, where some things have them, some things aren't. Are viruses alive? They don't have some of those criteria. So it's a difficult border. It's not a linear border. It's not a jump from one state, an instant jump from one state to the other. It's a fuzzy, blurred border where we can look at one edge of it and say, that's not life, viruses. And we can look at the other edge of it and say, this is life, a single cell, an amoeba of some kind. But in between, there are things that we can look at and go, well, is it alive? It has some of the criteria, but it doesn't have all of them. This has more than that, so is that more alive? It's not a single jump. It's a continuum. in the same way that species development is.
I have one question. Why is your hypothesis proven false every time there's a live birth or an active mitosis?
But it isn't, because
or an egg hatched.
That's completely unconnected.
Well, you see, here's the thing. What we have examples of new life being formed every single day. Every single day. Billions of times every single day. Not just once.
Yep.
And every single time, these billions of times a day, its biogenesis is being proven true. And abiogenesis is falsified.
But abiogenesis isn't in direct opposition to biogenesis.
Well, of course it is.
No, it isn't.
Because
biogenesis is an observation that life produces life, which is true.
Right.
Once life has arisen,
now
life
then you
produces more life.
No. You're adding words to it. You say once life has arisen.
Yeah.
That
has
is
to start somewhere.
That's right. But that's not the theory of biogenesis. The biogenesis theory.
No, I know it isn't the theory of biogenesis.
Oh, hold on. Now you're interrupting me. The theory of biogenesis says nothing about once life has arisen. What it says is that life always comes from life. Intelligence and consciousness always arises from intelligence and consciousness. Mm-hmm. That's what it says. So when you go back to the first life, you would have to postulate that a life brought forth that first life if you're going to continue with your hypothesis of biogenesis. So, in other words, biogenesis points to a God. It says a God had to, something, of course it does. It says something had to create that first life here on Earth. Okay? Because life comes from life.
So what you're saying is there has to have been some kind of act of abiogenesis.
No. Biogenesis, where life brought forth life.
So what life produced the first life on Earth then?
God.
So you're defining God as alive?
Yes.
Under what
Absolutely.
criteria?
Absolutely, God is alive.
What criteria?
Now we're going to another line of evidence, okay, that you would reject, but I frankly don't care. You see, there are millions of us out here that know God is alive. And because
obviously I dispute that.
Well, you can dispute that. I can dispute that you have parents.
Okay. I'm sure you can, but that's completely irrelevant.
No, it's not. I don't believe you have parents. Prove it.
Why? It's completely irrelevant.
How is it irrelevant?
It's a completely different type of proof.
No, it isn't.
The concept of having parents is a plausible and known idea. Parents, we know this.
But I don't believe you have
postulating
parents.
That a person has parents.
How do I know you're
a reasonable hypothesis?
I don't know that you're a person.
That's right. I'm an AI.
As far as I know, that's a possibility.
It's quite possibly.
Okay,
and even an AI
has
to have been generated.
Prove. Yeah, now you're proving my point again. Even an AI, even an artificial intelligence, has to be generated by someone. Why do you say that?
Because we observe biogenesis and it's a reasonable analogy.
Okay, so in other words, you observe that intelligence had to come forth from intelligence.
No, I disagree with that.
No, you just agreed with that.
No, I said life.
Yeah. You also said that if you were an artificial intelligence, you had to be created by somebody.
Yes, by life as an analogy.
You said if you were an artificial intelligence, if you were another intelligence, you had to be created. So you're saying the same thing that I'm saying. Yes, you did. Everybody heard you.
No, I didn't.
You obviously
I said it had to be brought forth by someone as an analogy to life.
There you go. Okay, it had to be brought forth by someone. So
as an analogy, yes. Okay.
Not even as an analogy. Okay, you didn't say as an analogy. You just said it had to be brought forth by somebody else. Mm-hmm. So you're agreeing with me.
Yes.
Okay.
So yeah, let's go with yes.
Okay, so if you agree with me, then you have to say there is no instance that we can point to, and we can say,
currently,
this is abiogenesis. There is no act, there is not one single life out of the hundreds of billions of life forms you could point to. There's not a one
currently,
that you can say this came forth through abiogenesis. So if you have all of these hundreds of billions of life forms, and not a single one of them came through abiogenesis, but every single one came through biogenesis, then you're proving my point. Biogenesis proves true every single time as it falsifies abiogenesis.
No.
Yes.
It doesn't falsify abiogenesis.
Because not one of them came through abiogenesis. Yeah. Or any time that you can point to. Okay. Now.
And yet I can point to a time in the past.
No, you cannot point to it. You cannot point to a time in the past where abiogenesis occurred. You can point to a time.
Say that.
You can point to a time in the past where you hypothesize that abiogenesis occurred. But then
it was 100%. If there's no life,
no,
abiogenesis.
So you don't know the difference between a fact, an observation, and a hypothesis.
I don't see the relevance.
You don't see the relevance.
It is a fact that
you're
saying the past of life.
You're saying that your hypothesis is a fact, a proven true fact.
No, I'm not.
Yes, you are.
No, I'm not.
You said the fact that there is life on Earth proves that abiogenesis occurred.
Yes.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean I'm saying that a specific process of abiogenesis is a fact.
I didn't say any a specific process, but abiogenesis in general. You're saying, okay, now what you have to do.
At some point, life arose from non-life.
That is, and your hypothesis is that occurred.
No, that's an observation.
No, your hypothesis is that occurred through abiogenesis, correct?
Well, that's because that's what we call life.
Is that correct? Is your hypothesis regarding the existence of life on Earth? Do you observe that and then you hypothesize that this occurred through abiogenesis?
Through
abiogenesis.
Which specific sense of abiogenesis are we using for that sentence?
Are you really this thick, Vincent?
No, because I'm using it as a general term for
I am too.
Life arising from
I am too.
So yes, at some point in the past, abiogenesis happened under that definition.
That is your hypothesis.
No, that's an observation.
No. So you don't know the difference between an observation and a hypothesis. You don't even know what an observation is. Your observation
is something we see.
You're right. In the past, there was no life. Do you know? And what
now there is.
What do you see?
We see that there wasn't life in the past.
No, you see that.
Now we see that there is life.
Now, how do you see there was no life in the past?
By the methods that you were talking about earlier on.
No, how do you see
like
that you don't
spectrography of
that don't tell you there was no life in the past?
And examining the rocks that we have.
That don't tell you there was no life in the past.
And looking at the conditions.
That doesn't tell you
that the Earth.
That does not tell you there was no life in the past. What you observe, Vincent, is that there is presently life on Earth. That's what you observe. Now, your hypothesis then...
So you don't think that historical observations...
You're interrupting me now. Your hypothesis... you're basing your hypothesis on your observation that life exists on Earth now. Your hypothesis is abiogenesis. Okay, that's how you hypothesize. That is how you hypothesize life on Earth began. Now, falsify that.
The only way to falsify that would be to observe life existing back to the beginning of the
No,
universe.
it's not.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not.
Of course it is. Because
no, it's
we
not.
observe life
It has
arose
been
on this planet.
Dude, Vincent, don't be thick. It's been falsified 1 billion times.
No. Current biogenesis doesn't falsify abiogenesis in the past.
No. You act like they have never performed experiments trying to create life.
I don't think they have. They've done.
You don't think they have? Are you kidding me? You mean
I don't know of any? Can you cite any papers?
Well, do you think they're going to go around bragging we tried and failed?
Yes.
1 billion times? Do you? No. You mean to tell me?
There are a huge number of papers that failed.
Do you mean to tell me? Do you mean to tell me that we can extract the DNA out of an E. coli bacteria cell? We can write a DNA program and inject it back into there.
Mm-hmm.
But we've never tried to create life in the lab. Are you seriously going to expect anybody in the?
As I say, if you've got some papers,
are you seriously going to expect anybody in the audience to believe that?
Well, I'm remaining skeptical until I see actual evidence of that.
Oh, okay. Well, then how do we know at this life conference, for instance, that where Dawkins and Venter and this other panel of 5 or 6 scientists are sitting together talking about life, saying, we have never been able to create life. We still don't even know the vehicle by which non-life becomes life.
We don't at the moment.
Okay,
we don't have a handle on that specific.
You're going to sit there.
Reaction.
You're seriously going to believe that they're saying all that, having never tried to create life before. We can clone, but we can't create life from scratch.
It wouldn't surprise me if someone has tried it.
It wouldn't surprise
evidence of it.
You. That's because they failed, dude. Every single time.
There's plenty of papers about failure.
Yeah, there's plenty of papers about failure, but why waste your time if you don't find
because even failure can produce useful insights.
The Miller-Urey test was attempting to reproduce abiogenesis. Of course it was.
No, it wasn't.
Of course it was, and it failed. It utterly failed. And then you have attempts that have been made for over 100 years to create life and failed. Now, here's the thing, Vincent. You want to sit here and you want to say, okay, well, we've just never tried to create life. The truth is, then you're saying that it's not even falsifiable. You're saying you can't even test it.
No.
Of course you are.
No.
Okay, so you're saying this has never been tested?
I've no idea, as I said. I wouldn't be surprised, but I've not seen any evidence to say that it has been directly as an aim in a paper for an experiment. The Miller-Urey experiment wasn't designed to do that.
Yes, it was an example of trying to create life naturally, trying to observe life naturally creating itself. And it didn't happen. It failed. So here's what you have, Vincent. You have 2 lines of science, okay? And these lines of science say that only the one line of science says that only life brings forth life. Only consciousness and intelligence brings forth consciousness and intelligence. And they bring forth after their own kind, which is exactly what God said. Life brings forth after its own kind. That's how he created it. Abiogenesis is an utter failure at every turn in the road. You cannot get life. You can't observe it forming naturally. Let me tell you something. You call that natural. Life forming from non-life. Why do you call that a natural thing? That's the most unnatural thing out there.
Why is it unnatural?
Why is it unnatural? Because you never observe it. All you observe, and you've admitted, Ever. You have never observed it.
But then we also don't observe planets coalescing in the solar system.
So that has nothing to do with what we're talking about.
What
we're talking about
the validity of observation.
We are talking about life. Okay, you never observe it coming about any other way except through biogenesis. And biogenesis proves true every single life that comes about. Every single new life that's formed on Earth comes through biogenesis, not abiogenesis. Every single time they've tried to recreate abiogenesis, it has been another failure. I've got a friend that's kind of an expert on abiogenesis. His name is doggone. I debated him once. He's an atheist. But he can tell you about dozens and dozens of experiments to try to recreate abiogenesis that have failed. He wrote a book on it. So what I'm saying is abiogenesis is a complete failure. You never observe it. All you ever observe is biogenesis. And you observe that absolutely every single time. So there is your scientific proof for God right there. Okay.
Not really, no.
Oh, of course it is. Okay.
No, current observations
we have more proof.
Invalidate historical proof.
We have no. We have more proof for God than you do abiogenesis, my friend, through biogenesis. Okay. If you could point to abiogenesis and say, look, there it is, then you could prove me wrong.
Okay. So obviously you have a knowledge of the history of science, Eric, yeah?
Some, yes.
Yeah. Okay, so you're aware, no doubt, of the kind of inventiveness that we've seen, particularly since sort of 1700s, things like the Industrial Revolution and all those kind of things. And you're aware also of the developments that went on then, yeah?
That has nothing to do with nothing.
Developments that occurred.
That has nothing to do with
just
nothing.
About every point during that, people will have said, this is impossible. We can't do this.
So you're going to cling to hope and imagination.
No, I'm optimistic.
You're going to cling.
But I understand. I look at the history of science.
You're going to cling to the hope. You're going to cling to the hope, Vincent, that one day the impossible is going to prove true. One day,
not impossible.
One day, the thing that's been another failure through time and never observed in nature, never been able to be recreated in a lab.
Of things.
One day we're going to be able to prove that true, and you're going to throw biogenesis to this, and you're going to throw biogenesis to the side and insist there is no God.
I wouldn't throw biogenesis. Biogenesis will still be valid.
But you're going to insist.
Still produce life.
You're going to insist. You're going to insist. No, that doesn't prove that life had to come about through a God. There is no God. Now,
I wouldn't say it because of that.
You also have the line of science, astrophysics, that points to dark matter and dark energy that fix everything in the broken universe, everything in the broken theories. That proves that there is
an example of development in science.
There is an invisible, omnipresent, omnipotent power over the universe that is expanding it.
Well, there's several.
That is expanding it as it holds all of creation together.
Well, no, they're two different things. Like dark energy and dark matter.
How do you know?
Because I've read the papers.
Well, I have too. And if you've read the papers, then you know they don't know what they are.
Well,
they are hypothesizing that these are two different forces. They don't know they're two different forces.
No, they're not talking about two different forces. They're talking about a material and an energy, which is probably a field of some kind, yeah.
They don't know what it is.
No, they don't. They know it's a repulsive force, so it's something opposing gravity in some way. Like all things in science, we don't know stuff, so we try to find out about it.
The thing that they call dark energy is actually going against the laws of physics.
Well, no, because it's
yes,
physics, so it can't be going against. It might go against the ones we know, but that's something we know.
Well, that's exactly what I mean. So, for instance, the speed by which you have to understand the entire theory of expansion as presented by Dr. Guth
and Vilenkin and Paul.
Okay, well, what it is? What did they hypothesize?
They hypothesized that there was a boundary on the universe in the past, but not all of them actually agree about that.
Well, let me tell you Dr. Guth's hypothesis that he came out with in 1980 to fix the problem of flatness in the universe. What he said was, you have to have this sudden super hot expansion beyond imagination and beyond an imagined speed. Anything in the imagination can bring up, it's beyond all of that. Super hot and super fast. And all of a sudden, something causes it to put on the brakes, except not completely. It's still expanding. And then, that's what caused the universe to cool and flatten, collapse in on itself. And then all of a sudden, it began to increase its speed of expansion. Now, the laws of physics say that's not going to happen. And now it's going faster and faster and faster and faster. The rate of acceleration. The law of physics, after all these billions of years, say, no, that's impossible. There's something causing that to happen. Now, 3,500 years ago, before they knew anything about dark matter, dark energy, any of the effects that it has on the universe, God said, not only did he fling forth the stars, which implies a Big Bang, he goes on to say that I am expanding. Now, he said this in Isaiah. He said this in the Psalms. I am expanding this universe like a curtain. Present tense, and that present tense still goes today. Now, this was a 3,500-year-old claim. So, this is an observation that we have come to know is true. Okay, this is a claim by God. I did this. So science, not only does biogenesis prove that life comes from life, intelligence, and consciousness comes from intelligence and consciousness, but astrophysics is proving that there's a force that mirrors the Christian God that is in control of this universe and having all the weird effects that you see that shouldn't be happening. For instance, our galaxies should have flown apart millions of years ago, if not billions, but they haven't. They're still being held together mysteriously. And it's God that says, I'm holding all of creation together. So then you have the fact, Vincent, there's two lines of science right there that tell you it's reasonable to believe in a God. And then you have another thing here called anecdotal evidence that atheists just blow off. They pretend like it's not even there. They think 90% of the world is insane when we say, we know God the same way you know your parents. Now, granted, there's some fakes out there. There's some people that don't represent God. They're in it for the money. They're in it for whatever they can get out of it. I'll grant you that. But that does not discount the fact that some of us seriously, literally know God. And then you have, now, some of us can tell you of our experiences with God, personal experiences where we experienced an actual God in our life. And I've experienced it in a number of miraculous ways, from being healed when I was 2 years old of leukemia, my grandfather being healed after being hit with a train when I was 6 years old,
Yes,
people.
I've heard you talking about all those things.
5 people died, or excuse me, 4 people died. He was sent home to die, but he didn't die. You know, God answered my prayer. And he hasn't just answered my prayer, man. I have heard God literally. Now, people can call me crazy. I don't care. I'm not going to be a liar, though. I'm not going to be intimidated by people that don't believe and say that never happened to me, because it did happen to me. But then you have so many other things, man. You have the stories in the Bible that the world.
That's fair enough, but can we?
Well, hold on.
One point at a time.
Hold on. One more thing. You have more than that. You have entire histories of entire cultures that all agree together that there are powers operating in this earth that are above us. Some of them are good and some of them are evil. And they tell about the very same stories that happened. For instance, the story of the flood. There's over 200 cultures that have passed that story down, and it's an ancient story. Over 200 of them, and most of them were not even supposed to have contact with one another. And then you have the stories of these gods trying to create a rebellion, where you have the story of Prometheus, which basically the same story of Lucifer.
Not really, no.
Oh, yeah, of course. Both of them came to give light to mankind, and both of them were punished by the gods. Then you have the stories of, oh, yes, you do. And then you have stories of the Great Flood. That goes back to Atlantis, and that goes back to all of these other stories of the Great Flood coming from India and right down to the Hopi civilizations that were saved by the ant people. So you have all of these ancient stories of the flood, Gilgamesh. You have all of these ancient stories of the flood that come down to us from all these different civilizations telling the same story. And then we have evidence of it. Evidence of the worldwide flood. Now, for instance, we have the demise of the dinosaurs. The demise of the dinosaurs, we're told by people who want to hold to the paradigm that over a period of 200 million years, we had extinction event after extinction event after extinction event during the Triassic, the Jurassic, and the Cretaceous periods. And that these extinction events included asteroid strikes, massive volcanic activity that was so bad they called it volcanic flooding of the earth. And all of these things triggered seismic floodings and tsunamis. Now, all of this is said to have happened when the world was in one continent, Pangea. So, if you have all of these things happening to one continent, and then you have evidence saying that, yes, it was global flooding, but it was just stretched out over 200 million years. Okay. There wasn't a part of the earth that wasn't flooded during this time, during this 200 million year period. But then you go to the hard evidence, the two lines of science that tell us dinosaurs did not die out 65 million years ago. According to Mary Schweitzer's tests, these dinosaurs can't have died more than 250,000 years ago. She gives us her figures. She was able to take the half-lives of proteins and improve or increase their stability 200-fold over a period, stretching it out from a 3-day period to a 2-year period. So when you multiply that times actual half-lives of things that we know they found in these dinosaur bones and horns. And before I get into this part, she also tells us that these things have been found since the 1960s, meaning that they've kept this from the public. For over 40 years that they've been finding soft tissues and dinosaur bones and horns. Been keeping it from the public. That, my friend, is a conspiracy. Now people can say, oh, he's hollering conspiracy theory. But if you have all these people that want all this recognition because they want to advance their careers and they find soft tissue in dinosaur bone and don't report it, that's weird. That's odd. That's a conspiracy. That's information being held from the public. Why? Because it ruins their paradigm. And then we have Mary Schweitzer proving that the age of these dinosaur bones cannot be over 250,000 years old, according to her tests. That's when you test collagen taking its longest form, which would be a 117-year half-life. That's collagen from cartilage. That's not using the blood collagen, which is only 60 to 70 days, or the skin collagen, which is just 15 years. That's going to the longest 117-year half-life of collagen. Now, when you take that, you give it 10 half-lives, because after 10 half-lives, there's nothing left, basically, of anything. Then you have 1,170 years. When you multiply that 200-fold, Mary's 200-fold increase, you only have 234,000 years. That's the oldest those bones could be. So then what do? Then the next logical thing is, let's test these bones for C14 then. So they take up scores and scores and scores of samples of dinosaur bones from different dinosaurs, different museums, different digs around the world, different nations. They send them all to different labs. And what do they find out? Every single sample came back young. Every single one from every different dinosaur from every different lab. Scores of them come back between 9,000 and 40,000 years old. 9,000 and 40,000. Now, why am I getting to this? Because of this. They're so desperate now to prove that that's not right. On one hand, they're producing papers that show how C14 is the most accurate method of dating that we have. And then on the other hand, they're pulling out papers like this one, Radiocarbon in Dinosaurs, still don't disprove millions of years. And what they say is that every single test came back false. And we need to warn the kids that might be influenced by this. C14 is, sure, it's great, except when it comes to testing dinosaur bones, and then it's giving us a false reading every single time. That's a bunch of crap, dude. And then, on top of that, Jack Horner being interviewed by Bob Enyart. You can find this on YouTube. Type it in on YouTube. You can find the actual conversation where he's offered. Jack Horner is Mary Schweitzer's boss. He was the science advisor on all three Jurassic Park movies, probably the most notable paleontologist until his student, which was Mary Schweitzer, who found the soft tissue in the T-Rex and the hadrosaur. When Bobby Enyart offered him $10,000 and then $20,000 after he refused, just to have that T-Rex bone carbon dated, he ceased to practice science. He said, no, we're not going to do that because of the spin that Christians are going to get from this. Dude, that's ceasing from science at that point. That's ceasing from science. He is no longer a scientist. He is now an activist that's preserving a paradigm. So yes, science is even being, turned into something that it shouldn't be to protect this paradigm. They are ceasing to run tests just because it's going to give the Christians something to run with. Now, that's insane, but that's what science has become. So, Vincent, it's not even science at this point. So we have to take our observations. We have all of these lines of science now, proving that God is true, that God is real, and proving that the Bible is real. The Bible is true. Because when you take all of these disasters and extinction events that supposedly stretched out over a 200 million year period. And then you look in the last 40,000 years, which is how young these dinosaur bones are testing at the very, very oldest, between 9,000 and 40,000 years old. Then here's what you see. All of these extinction events, all of these asteroids that struck, all of these volcanic activity, all of this volcanic activity that went on worldwide, and all of these tsunamis and seismic flooding across the world had to be crammed within a 40,000 year period. And the only time period that this possibly even fits is the Younger Dryas about 12,500 years ago, or 11,000 years ago, give or take 1,000, when all of a sudden we had the scablands made, we had 400 feet added to the ocean level, to the sea level. All of these things occurred, and that's when we read about the global floods from Plato and other ancient writers and other ancient cultures that go back that far. That's where they're reaching back to. Plato lived 2,000 years ago, and he said this happened, Atlantis sank 9,000 years ago, which puts it right at the Younger Dryas period, which is when all of this happened. So that's the only time. So we had a worldwide flood too. They just try to bury it over and stretch it out over 200 million years and say, well, it wasn't really global at one time. Well, yeah, that's what we're come now. That's what we come to now. When we put all of these scientific facts together. But there, it should be reasonable to anybody. That it's reasonable, even the atheist should know that it's reasonable for a man to believe in God, especially when one has a relationship with God, in the same way that you would have a relationship with your parents. Now, if you tried to tell me that I don't have a relationship with God, that would be as ridiculous to me as me trying to convince you that you never had any parents. You never knew your parents. You didn't have any parents. You may not even be human. That's how ridiculous it is to me when I hear people tell me there is no God and I have no proof for God. I have plenty of proof. I had enough proof in my lifetime to know there's a God and to find God and to develop a relationship with God. That's all I'm saying, Vincent. And listen, buddy, I don't hate you. I don't hate Connor. I don't hate Jordan. They hate me, and you know they hate me.
No, they don't.
Yes, they do.
No,
Come on.
They don't. I know them, Eric. Remember?
Yeah. Make memes of me on oxygen saying, well, you're going to die soon enough and you'll be out of our hair. So.
That's just an observation, isn't it?
Oxygen sucking thief. Things like that. Now, come on. Let's be honest.
Anyway, that's
so
fine. I mean, you've been talking for about half an hour, Eric. So, do you want me to respond to some of those points?
Can you prove anything I said wrong?
Can I prove anything you said wrong? Well, science doesn't do proof.
Science does.
But I can use a bit of logic, yeah.
That's another fallacy. Science doesn't prove anything. That's a bunch of crap, dude. Science proves medicines work every single day, or else there's going to be a lot of people.
There's a very high level of certainty. Yeah.
Okay, so it proves that it works. Do you believe we went to the moon?
Do I believe we went to the moon?
Yeah.
No, I accept the evidence for it.
You accept the evidence for it. So then science would have proven then that we can go to the moon. Do you believe we have...
There's a chance that it could have all been faked.
Do you believe that we have...
There is a very small chance, but
do you believe
there is
we
a
have,
chance that it could have been.
Do you believe we have satellites?
Again, I've not seen one personally. I don't have evidence of them, but I accept the evidence.
I have
a fairly good degree of...
You can see satellites personally. You don't even need a telescope to see them.
Yeah, you can see them going over. Yeah, I see.
Okay.
The Starlink and things like that.
Okay. Do you believe airplanes can fly?
I accept the evidence that they can fly.
Oh, you don't know that they can fly?
Those two different things.
But do you believe and know that jets can fly?
They're two different things.
What?
I have experienced planes flying. Obviously, I've been on them.
Okay.
So my personal experience says, yes, planes can fly.
Now, do you both believe...
So I accept the evidence that it does. I don't believe it.
You don't believe it?
No.
Why?
Because
so
belief is an act that you do without evidence.
So you disbelieve it?
No.
Okay, so then you believe it.
No.
You believe it, and
I don't need to believe
that's the thing I hate about atheists. They have to.
I'm not an atheist, Eric.
Well, whatever you want to call yourself. That's the thing. That's one of the things I hate about people that say there is no God. This is it. This is one of them right here, because you got to play word games. If you're going to know something, you have to also believe it. Like if you know 1 + 1 = 2, then you also believe 1 + 1 = 2.
The problem I have
it's
with
not
that,
it's not either or.
The reason that I'm being specific is that a lot of people who don't argue very well tend to equivocate about belief. And I understand what you're saying. When you accept something as true, then yes, that's one definition of belief.
Yes. So
but there's also a definition of belief that says it's often without proof that you accept it.
Well, that's not the case.
Equivocation there. It's a blurry word.
Well,
so I tend not to use it.
That's not where I stand with God. I actually have reason to know and do know. But what I'm saying is, Vincent, when we know things, we also believe those things. At least a reasonable person does.
I accept that. I mean, if you're saying belief means accepting evidence for stuff, then fair enough. I accept, yes, I believe those things.
Okay.
But as I say, the problem I've had with, when people have asked me that in the past, and they've said, do you believe this? I've gone, yes, I believe that. Then they'll go, oh, you just believe it like I believe in God then, or, you must believe all these things.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, you're using a different sense of it there.
Well, you see,
so that's why I'm a bit picky about it.
Even in the same way, I can know and believe that there's a God. I know that there's a God for very personal reasons. He has interacted with me. I've interacted with him. Mm-hmm. But I can also believe there's a God because of that and because of the further scientific evidence that points to God and proves to, as far as I'm concerned, we have reasonable proof. We have more reasonable proof than there is a God than anybody has that there isn't. So
talking of which, do you want me to sort of cover a few of the points that you...
Sure, go right ahead.
Okay, cool. So going right back to the start then, we were talking dark matter and energy. Yeah. Dark matter and energy is a current hypothesis for the observed behavior we see in the universe. So dark matter is hypothesized to be what it is that's drawing large-scale objects like galaxies together. Dark energy is hypothesized to be the thing that's causing the acceleration of the expansion of the universe. Yeah.
So
the dark energy is, as any other force in physics, universal. Gravity is universal. The weak force is universal. Electromagnetism is universal. These things are all universal. They exist everywhere in the universe to varying degrees of strength. The same with dark energy. Yeah.
Now, do you understand though that they're giving a name to an observation?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
The same as we do to things falling. We observe it and we call it gravity.
Well, what I mean is they're observing something that goes against the known laws of physics.
Yeah.
For instance, we have the rate of speed at which a galaxy spins and the atomic weight of the bodies within that galaxy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the best we can figure, according to the atomic weights and the rate of spin, these galaxies should have flown apart millions or billions of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But they haven't. So there is a force. They don't know what that force is. There is a force that's holding that together. And because they don't know what that force is, they're calling it dark energy. Now, they're also noticing that
just as we gave a name to things that we didn't understand in the past, like magnetism or electricity and things like that. That's how science works. We observe something, we give it a name so we can describe it and tell other people about it, and then we investigate it.
Well, it's not just like that. These are things that defy our known laws of physics.
Well,
okay.
Nobody ever said we know them all.
No, they didn't. But then again, we can't imply that we don't. So what we do know, though, is that something, you see, I don't want you to gloss this over because this is an important point that proves it's reasonable to accept God. Because God said 3,500 years ago that he was doing these things to the universe, that he cast out the stars. He literally flung them out. Okay, so, and then he said...
Yeah. I mean, having read the Bible, I know these things.
Yeah, then he said...
specifically the Bible, though, Eric?
Then he also, but you don't read it in the Quran, that he is expanding the universe now. You don't read that in any other biblical...
I think it does,
no, it doesn't. Nor do you read
about him stretching out like a tent.
No, that's in the Bible.
I thought the Quran quoted it as well. Okay.
No. It says that in the Bible, stretching it out like a tent and stretching it out like a curtain. And it uses the present tense, stretching. So it also says, and this said that 3,500 years ago before we knew that was happening. So you have to say that dark matter and dark energy, in their every known attribute, they mirror the description of the Christian God in their absolutely every single attribute, not a single one lacking.
And they're not intelligent.
And that these things were said...
They're not omniscient.
Sure. What isn't?
Dark matter and dark energy.
How do you know?
Because we observe what it does.
Yeah, how do you know it's not omniscient? How do you know it's not intelligent?
Because we observe what it does.
So?
We observe its behavior.
Yeah, but
in the same way that we observe the behavior of gravity.
Yeah.
Gravity does similar things.
How do you know it never communicated?
It's omniscient.
How do you know it never communicated the Bible to us?
Because we have no evidence for that.
Well, yes, we do. Because God is invisible.
No, we have no direct evidence.
Well, it came from...
You sort of...
Here's what I'm saying,
postulating
Vincent.
that the two things are similar is not evidence, Eric.
No. Here's what I'm saying. I'm not saying the two things are similar. I'm saying that in its every known attribute, it absolutely reflects an attribute of the Christian God. And you can't say that about anything else. Now, not only that.
Well, yes, you can. I mean,
you can't.
Use the same analogy.
No, hold on. We also have the evidence of who the Bible was came from, that was given to man. An invisible, omnipresent, omnipotent force.
Allegedly.
Yeah. And well, I happen to know that invisible, omnipotent force.
The problem I have with
happen to know
experience is that how then do you validate it, and what about other people's personal experience?
Well, let me tell you something.
Yours?
I don't know of any experiences that contradict mine.
There's plenty of other theists who have had visions of their gods and been healed by their gods, and etc., etc.
I don't know of anyone that has contradicted mine. Not a single one from any religion. You see, here's something else.
Well, they don't contradict you, do they? They're just alternative.
Here's something.
But it sort of refutes monotheism, surely.
No. Actually, every religion in the world, every ancient religion in the world, verifies what I believe. Every single one. A friend of mine.
Surely they verify the earliest, don't they?
every single ancient religion verifies mine. Every single one. A friend of mine.
Yours was a later one, so surely the earliest one is the one that's verified by the later one.
I don't see how you say it's an earliest. I do. You say it's a later one because you're ignorant of the facts that I know. And that's where you get that.
Well, you're talking about it being, what, 3,500 years old?
No. For instance, let's talk about the Mesopotamians.
That came before Judaism and Christianity.
Okay, that's what you say. But you're ignorant of the fact that the Mesopotamians in their earliest form, when Gilgamesh would have lived, whose story is very much like that of Nimrod. Abraham was a contemporary of Nimrod. Okay. So that, and Abraham was the one who God spoke to and chose to bring forth his nation, Israel, eventually in time, and separated himself unto himself. Abraham was a contemporary of Nimrod. So, and not only was he a contemporary, he lived in the same place at the same time. He lived in Ur of the Chaldees. In other words, he lived right there in the very same area that the stories of Gilgamesh and Nimrod come from, at the very same time. So no, those stories did not predate. Abraham was aware of them, and Abraham is... Now, let me explain something else. All of these ancient religions, right down to the Indian religion, religions from India, the Bhagavad Gita, the Mahabharata, all of these things, they tell the same stories. You get the same stories from the Greeks, you get the same stories from the Romans. These stories have been handed down to us from time immemorial. You have one God that is above them all. There is a divine council. There are those that rebel against that God. They come down to the earth. They mate with human women. They interbreed. They create half-breeds. They create hybrids. The Bible calls them Nephilim and Rephaim. The Greeks called them like Hercules and etc. And you have the very, very same stories coming down history from every single ancient religion and mythology on earth. Every single one. Now, if you want to say that they all just made up these stories and they all just happen to tell the same stories through time, slight little variations here and there through time, but it's basically the same stories. And it was all by accident. I think that's an unreasonable thing to believe. But if you look at all these things now, and you put them together, you take all of these ancient religions and ancient mythologies that are telling you the same stories, and then you take all of the scientific evidence, like from astronomy, that describes this power that mirrors exactly the description of the Christian God and the attributes of that Christian God. And then you take the lines of science that tells you that the flood really occurred. And then you take biogenesis. And then you take the stories from 90% of the people on earth that tell you there is a God. You put all of this together, buddy. You have evidence, you have proof of a God. More so, much more so, overwhelmingly more so than you do evidence or proof that there is no God. That's what I'm saying.
I would I would disagree that the vast majority of them are evidence. A lot of them are hypothesized connections and assertions for most of the cases.
That keeps proving true.
You're taking one particular interpretation of history because it fits with your beliefs.
No, I'm taking everything that I said, every word that I said, all these various lines, pardon me, all of these various lines of science and all of these ancient mythologies and religions, all pointing to God, every single one. And I'm putting it on top of
as I've shown with Abiogenesis, the display or description you're using of it isn't actually what it is, and you seem to be throwing out any kind of historical observation, which means that forensics surely then is wrong.
No, what I'm saying, Vincent, try to get this and try to understand. You guys asked for proof of God, the physical scientific evidence for God. Mm-hmm. What I've given you is 1,000 times. Hold on. I've given you 1,000 times more evidence saying that there is a God and scientific proofs than any of you, all of you together, can give me to say there isn't. Okay, so when you
that's because you can't prove negatives, Eric.
When you put things side by side, of course you can prove negatives. When you put things side by side, your beliefs against mine, their beliefs against mine, and you test them scientifically, you guys are left in the dirt because you can't disprove a word that I've said, not a single one.
Well, I've already shown you that your understanding of abiogenesis is not accurate.
Well, that's not true. You just want to assert that. I understand exactly what abiogenesis is.
And it's not.
What?
You keep insisting that it's a sudden occurrence. And
no, that's not what I keep insisting. That is a straw man. I understand that there are different possible methods of abiogenesis, different thoughts on abiogenesis, and yet abiogenesis, the one thing they all have in common is life randomly formed over a period of time and just fell together and poof, popped to life.
Well, again, randomly. So you
because it is random.
The laws of chemistry.
When you have two chemicals, when you have two chemicals that form in the first place, that's a random combination. They randomly fell together. They randomly fell together in a way that they could interact. Any chemical.
Yes, so they're constrained, yes.
Okay. So then when you have two or more chemicals or two or more proteins randomly combining, they are randomly combining because they randomly fell together. They were not created, put together by anything. They just happened to bump into each other.
Oh, right. Okay. Oh, in that sense. Yes. Okay. So it's a blend of stuff.
So I completely understand. I completely understand the theory of abiogenesis. I should say the hypothesis, because it's not proven to be true. It's proven in every instance. It's falsified every time it's ever been attempted.
Biogenesis doesn't falsify abiogenesis, Eric.
I said abiogenesis. Every time abiogenesis has been attempted in a lab, it has been falsified. So,
as I say, I'll remain skeptical until I've seen papers that.
Well, then
the goal was to.
I would suggest studying. Okay, I have. Now, here's the thing.
Well, the Miller-Urey isn't one.
Well, yeah, that was one. And here's another thing. Yes, it was. And
Miller-Urey was the experiment was designed to try and reproduce early atmosphere to see if complex chemicals could be produced.
And to see if life could be reproduced.
Precursors of life, perhaps, but not life. That wasn't their goal.
Yes. And they couldn't.
Well, they did. They succeeded.
No,
they produced complex amino acids.
Some. They produced a few, but not all.
Yeah, so that was their aim. So
no, it wasn't. They wanted to see if all of the products for life could. Yes, they did.
Their aim to produce complex amino acids.
They wanted to produce life.
No, they didn't.
Now, the cop-out is to say, yeah, they produced a couple amino acids. That's the cop-out. Okay. So, at any rate, you don't have abiogenesis proven true anywhere. Now, I don't know why you'd want to be so stubborn over that. That's just a fact. You know, as a matter of fact, Craig Venter, let me tell you how hysterical your side gets. Craig Venter, when he took the living E. coli bacteria cell and extracted its DNA and injected DNA that he created from other living materials, and it began to reproduce, your side went crazy. Your side started saying, he produced life from scratch. This proves once and for all the Christians are insane. And that was not true at all. The uproar was so strong, and people can Google this. Craig Venter had to go to the BBC, and he had to tell them, no, I did not create life from scratch, period. That's never been done. Nor is it ever.
Sorry about that. I didn't really hear that last bit. I've just been looking it up. So I've got a copy of the Miller-Urey paper here from 1953.
Yeah. Well, what I'm saying is...
Do you want me to read the first paragraph?
No, I want you to understand what was said here. Okay. What I want you to understand is Craig Venter, after your side went completely nuts saying Craig Venter created life from scratch because of what he did.
No, that was what the media said. They hyped it up as they usually
It wasn't just the media. I was debating people at the time on your side. I was debating atheists who were saying Craig Venter
understand it very much then.
Craig Venter just created life from scratch. But he didn't. He didn't even create life. He took an existing E. coli bacteria cell and created DNA from existing living materials and replaced its DNA with that.
Mm-hmm.
And it began to replicate.
Yes, I know.
So,
as I say, I agree. I've seen people saying that he created life and all that sort of thing, but that's not accurate. And I don't think any biologist who is au fait with the subject would say that either.
Well, yeah, a lot of people did.
Well, there's a lot of misunderstanding in science, Eric. We know that. People misinterpret and grasp it wrong.
I'll tell you one thing that really gets to me is that people from Nemesis claim to be people that protect science, and yet every single one of them that I've talked to didn't know as much as this creationist. For instance...
Well, for any group of people like that, you're always going to find someone that knows more about something than other people do. I mean, that's not uncommon.
Well, I'm talking about the whole group of Nemesis. Well, I'm going to give you some examples here.
I'm a member of Nemesis, Harry.
Yeah. And what I'm saying is, apparently I know more of it than you do.
Well, not so far.
Well, yeah, I believe
you seem to have misunderstood some of it.
No, you keep saying that.
Rationalized some of it.
You keep saying that I misunderstood some of it, and that's just all that is posturing. For instance, when I was supposed to debate Jeffrey first. When Jeffrey come on, he won't even come on. He won't even show his face, because he literally knows nothing about science. But the first time I was supposed to debate him, an opening post was put up for him. And he didn't even know how to address the opening post. Has the man ever even been in a debate? And then he said, I don't want to debate that in this group. So I said, okay, come over to mine. And I started another opening post. I asked him to introduce himself, tell me what flavor of evolution you believe in, and etc. Just identify your position, basically. And he didn't even know how to address the opening post. He didn't know what a debate was. He didn't know how to read the rules. One post per person, per turn, and we all take alternating turns. So when he blew that off and he began just spamming the thread, I said, no, you didn't even read the opening post. So I started another opening post. All in all, I opened 5 opening posts for Jeffrey. And he never once got it right. Never introduced himself. Never told what flavor of evolution he believed in. And that was our topic, was evolution. So then there was Graham. Graham quit. Graham in a huff says, all right, I can't prove evolution, period. And so there you go. Then there was Connor and Jordan. They didn't know that biological materials like proteins and etc. had a half-life. He didn't know blood proteins, collagen proteins,
yes,
etc.
Unless you look into these things, you don't.
Well, that's exactly.
I mean, people assume when you say half-life that you're talking about radioactivity.
Yeah, they didn't even
understanding of it.
They didn't even know what a half-life was. They didn't even understand a half-life, and
I'm sure
they didn't understand. They didn't understand that after 2 half-lives, you only have 25%. They didn't understand that after 10 half-lives, you basically have nothing. There was so much. I could go on all day long with things that they didn't understand.
I'm sure, but none of them are me, Eric. So I
really
don't see how that's relevant.
But you saying, even though I have explained biogenesis, I've explained a lot of the astrophysics and the history of the present model of the universe, you want to say I misunderstand abiogenesis?
Well, it's not so much misunderstanding, I suppose, is that you interpret it to match your beliefs.
I don't interpret anything to match my beliefs. I tell the truth about it. What did I interpret to match my beliefs?
Well, as an example for dark matter and dark energy, you interpret the attributes of those things to match your
I didn't interpret it.
Of God.
No, that's wrong.
Because even though...
That's wrong. All I did, Vincent, was I took their attributes, the things that they claimed. Astrophysicists.
So why don't you claim...
Hold on. The things, I take the things that the astrophysicists claim. And then I point to the fact that these are things that God claimed. God claimed that he did 3,500 years ago before we even knew. 3,500 years, for instance, before we knew the universe was expanding, God said that he was expanding, present tense, the universe. 2,000 years ago, before we noticed that something is mysteriously holding our galaxies together. 2,000 years ago, before we understood that, God said he was holding our galaxies, all of creation together. So that's what I'm saying.
That could easily be interpreted as meaning gravity instead.
No, it couldn't.
Of course it could. Gravity holds things together. That's what you're saying, is the analogy is things are being held together.
See, there's your lack of understanding.
That you're this
Vincent,
so gravity
is you.
holds things together.
No, this is your lack of understanding, Vincent, because you're not understanding that the galaxies, for instance, have an atomic weight, and they have the amount of gravity that they should be exerting within that particular galaxy, any particular galaxy, and we can figure that up, and we can also figure out their rate of speed, and understand that because of their atomic weight and their rate of speed and the gravity that they should be exerting on that, within that there is something else there. It is not the gravity within those things. So you're postulating that it might be gravity. You're hypothesizing it might be, but where's that gravity coming from?
I'm just observing your analogy.
You're not observing the analogy of anything. What I said is, they notice that there is a force that is overcoming the gravitational forces that are being exerted in that galaxy, along with the atomic weight of those planets and bodies within that galaxy, and those and the rate of spin at which it's turning. They observe all of that, and they said there's something else that's invisible that's exerting power over that, exerting force over that, and holding it together. That's what they observe.
Through gravity.
No, that's what you postulate. They don't know that it's through gravity. So all I'm saying is that all of these observations that they make that doesn't make sense are things that God claimed he did 2,000 and 3,500 years ago, respectively, before they even knew this was a thing. So, but you see, God knew, and this can't be proven to be untrue. God made God. Here's the point. Vincent, here's the point. God made those statements 3,500 years ago, 2,000 years ago.
Allegedly.
And we didn't even know about it then. 3,500 years later, they're saying, hey, something is expanding this universe and something is holding it all together, and it doesn't make sense. Now, you can postulate it's whatever it is. All I'm saying is this is evidence of God, because God said he was doing this all these thousands. No, that's not how I am interpreting it, Vincent. I am taking their claim. I am taking their... No, I am not interpreting anything, son.
Of course you are.
No, I'm not. What I'm doing is I'm taking their claim, and I'm taking the claim that's made in the Bible, and I'm saying these are the exact same claims. This one was made 2,000 years. How is it not the exact same claim?
One is a fairly generic and not very descriptive.
Oh, so
text.
So
the other
science
one is an accurate observation.
The accurate observation is that we notice the universe is expanding at an accelerated rate.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the statement from the Bible is that God is expanding the universe like a curtain. Now, that's exactly, when you look at how scientists talk about, the astrophysicists, how they interpret the expansion, how they explain the expansion is very, very similar. They compare it to blowing up a balloon, but it would be the same thing. They didn't have balloons back then. So you have the very same thing. That's all I'm saying. You have this claim made today. You have this claim made 3,500 years ago. You have this claim made today that something that we don't understand is holding the galaxies together, and it's invisible. It's omnipotent over the universe because these forces are expanding. They're holding it all together. It's invisible. It's omnipresent. Brother, these are all descriptors of God. That's all I'm saying. They observe and they tell what they observe. They can hypothesize, but that doesn't change their observation. And their observations match what the Bible tells us. So, you guys wanted proof of God. You wanted scientific evidence of God. I've given you that, and I don't think you've heard any of it. But that's okay.
I've heard all of it, Eric, but this is what I was talking about, your sort of interpretation. So just to cover that.
No, get off of here. My interpretation. Vincent, I am not interpreting anything. Now, you don't have to agree with anything that I'm saying. But get off of here with the condescending crap, son. I am taking the scientific observations, and I'm showing you what the Bible says, and I'm showing you that they match. I took Biogenesis. I showed you what Biogenesis asserts, and I showed you what God said, and they match. Biogenesis says that life only comes forth through life. That is a scientific observation. A scientific observation. Life only brings forth life. Intelligent, conscious life only brings forth conscious, intelligent life. That's where it comes from. It doesn't come from anything else. It doesn't randomly form. That is the whole thing behind biogenesis. Life does not randomly form from non-life, period. And it brings forth after its own kind. That is biogenesis. And that is the claim of God. And when you take that back to the first life and you project it backward, this is proof and evidence of God. Accept it or not, I don't care. And then we have astrophysics, dark matter and dark energy, an invisible, all-pervading force that is in all and through all, just like the Bible states God is. Invisible, omnipotent, all-powerful, all everywhere. Omnipresent. And that it's holding all of creation together, and that it's expanding the universe. These are things that God created. These are things that God said about him. And science is proving that there is a force out there that's invisible and omnipresent that is doing all these things that God said he did. And then we have Mary Schweitzer proving that dinosaurs couldn't have died out millions of years ago. Working for the most famous paleontologist of the last 100 years besides her now. She's probably taken that reign as the most famous. At any rate, my friends, that's what we have. And there's more. Absolutely every single ancient religion and mythology tells the same story. Absolutely everyone. I'm sorry, Geo. What happened to Vincent? They asked for scientific evidence of God. I'm giving them all kinds of scientific evidence for God, on top of all the evidence from all the people in the world that say, I know God. I've given them biogenesis. I've given them astrophysics. I've given them the fact that there was a flood. I've given them the fact that all of these ancient mythologies and religions all tell the same stories through time, from the beginning to now, of there being good gods and bad gods. So yes, we have one science after another proving that there's a God. And I don't believe this because I misunderstand abiogenesis. Vincent, you got to come off the condescending crap, son. You've got to come off of that. You're going to pretend like I'm unreasonable for believing in God? I'm going to tell you right now that if you don't, if you're going to claim to be a defender of science and you don't accept these things, then you're a most unreasonable person. As is anybody and everybody in Nemesis. If you would have been able to prove wrong any one thing that I've said about all of these sciences pointing to God, rather than just the piddly little, oh, that's your interpretation. No, it's not my interpretation. I simply accept their observations. And then I show you what God said. That's what's going on here. Now, I don't want you, Vincent, I like you. But you got to get off this thick-headedness. Really, I mean that. You've got to see, if you can't see that it's reasonable to believe that maybe there's a God, if you can't see that it's absolutely reasonable through all of this, then I'm not the one with the problem, my friend. I'm not. My belief is firmly founded, and my knowledge is even more firmly founded. I know God because of the personal experience I've had with God, just like other people. But we can go on even without that. The Bible tells us that we should be able to look at nature and tell everything about God, right down to his eternal power and his Godhead, just by looking at nature. And if you can't do that, there's something wrong. That's why I took my time, these 2 hours plus 2.5 hours. That's why I took this time to go over this with you. 2.5 hours, Vincent, of nothing but science, proving that it's reasonable to believe in God, proving what Romans said is true. You should be able to look at nature itself. Biogenesis, the real observation. Only life brings forth life. It never comes about any other way that we observe. That's proven true billions of times every single day when you get right down to the mitosis and the dividing of living cells, the hatching of roach eggs and spider eggs and chicken eggs and live births, billions of times every single day. This proves true. How many times does abiogenesis prove true in a day? None. How many times has it proven true in a year? None. 10 years? None. A century? None. Ever? None. You don't have one time, Vincent. Not one. What's this proves? This proves that abiogenesis is unreasonable. You call it a natural process. No, it's not. It's an unnatural process. Biogenesis is the natural process. Only life brings forth life. That's what's natural. So, my friends, whether they want to receive it or not, they now have all the scientific evidence in the world that proves that it's reasonable to believe in God. To Kirsten, I don't know if you're still out there or not, but if you are, I hope that you've heard this. Because of all the people I think that you can see, it's reasonable to believe in God. And my other haters out there who Vincent says doesn't hate me, I love you guys. I don't care if you hate me. I don't care if you want to make memes calling me an oxygen thief, thinking that hurts me. That doesn't hurt me. Just like the other stuff you do, doesn't hurt me. When you mass report to Facebook my posts, that doesn't hurt me. When you say I bullied you, this just makes you look like a wimp. This just makes you look like a group of wimps. When somebody tells you that they have, as the owner of a group on Facebook, that they put up with your shenanigans and you're wearing out their patience and you're officially challenged. You know, if that bothers you, you're a wimp. You are infantile. Mommy and Daddy did you a great disservice. When you report posts like this, you're about as bright as a busted bulb, kid. That's lightweight, man. On top of that, it's the truth in Connor's case. And it's being nice and charitable toward Connor. You saw he couldn't even sit here without cussing. He has no self-control at all. When you got to report stuff like that to Facebook and say, he's bullying me. And back in the day, we had other words for that, man. I'm not going to use them here. Let's just say you're a wimp. You guys can get off this kick about defending science when you can't even look at what I've given you here today and say, it's unreasonable to believe in a God. Scientifically speaking. So, my friends, there comes a point when it's like casting your pearl before the swine. Hello, Boaz. God bless you, Christian. Vincent Price, you had your closing statement. Your closing statement was, I misunderstood abiogenesis. When it was absolutely proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that I didn't misunderstand a thing that I talked about. I love you guys, man. You may not believe it. I don't care. God knows the truth. But at this point, we've been on for 2.5 hours. I want to thank you for joining in. And I appreciate that, Gio. Thank you very much for the prayers, brother. God bless you. I love you all very much. You guys have a great day. This is Eric, a.k.a. Wolfbitten. This is Hot Topics. And I've given you today the scientific proofs of God. I suggest that you go through this again and ask yourself, why is it unreasonable? Why is it unreasonable? Look at this. We have about 6 more points to cover. The flood stories, Mary Schweitzer, personal experience, Plato, and you're forgetting biogenesis. You're forgetting astronomy, astrophysics, and personal experience. So I'll tell you what, you're not going to prove anything that I said wrong, Vincent. You had, 2.5 hours. Okay. Now you just want to stretch it out. You couldn't prove anything that I said wrong. Okay, I'm going to bring you on for a second. And I'm going to ask you one question, Vincent. And here you go. Vincent, I have one question to ask you. You're on the air. And I'm just going to ask you one thing. Is there anything that I said in Biogenesis, regarding biogenesis, or regarding astrophysics, or regarding the ancient mythologies and religious stories that have been handed down over the millennia or Mary Schweitzer's findings and the finding of C14 in dinosaur bones, proving that they're between 10 and 40,000 years old, and they're trying to cover this up, and they've been covering up since the 1960s, and that the only age that could possibly fit all of this would have been the younger Dryas, roughly 11 or 12,000 years ago, when we had 400 feet added suddenly to the water table, the sea level, and etc. Is there anything you can prove me wrong in? You're on the air, Vincent.
Yes.
What can you prove me wrong in?
Well, several of those things we've already covered. Some of it.
No, you didn't.
We didn't really get the chance to cover a lot of the later stuff. Though.
I'm just asking.
As I listed there.
What can you prove me wrong in? Let's name one and get to it.
Well, I've already shown you that Biogenesis doesn't refute abiogenesis.
Oh, okay. So you can't prove anything that I've said wrong.
I've already pointed out your descriptions of dark matter and dark energy are too vaguely connected with what the Bible says.
So no. So you can't prove anything.
You did cut me off when I was trying to actually quote what it said in the Bible. But,
so it says it in more than one place. It says it in several places. Isaiah, the Psalms.
I was talking primarily about Isaiah 40. Yeah.
Okay. And so
anyway, I was going to say, Eric, it's 20 to 1 in the morning here, and I have to be up for work in the morning.
Okay, so you can't prove anything wrong, though, right?
So yes, I wanted to get on to Mary Schweitzer and your descriptions of her papers, but that's probably something to say for another day. I think.
I have her papers right here. What would you like to get
but
to?
I haven't got the time, Eric. I'm gonna have to get to bed. It's, as I say, it's nearly 1:45 in the morning. So, okay. So you just muted yourself, Eric. So anyway, and the other thing was this thing you have with younger Dryas. I'm not sure quite what that's about. I'd need to do a bit of research first.
The younger Dryas. So you can't prove anything wrong about Mary Schweitzer.
I can't prove anything wrong about what she said.
No, you can't prove anything wrong I said about Mary Schweitzer.
Yes.
What?
Yeah. Well, so I'll have to save that for another time, Eric.
So in other words, you can't. So you're just going to assert it. No, you can't. You can't. If you could, you would. And so I obviously also know more. Minutes? I obviously also know more about the younger Dryas than you do.
Well, it's not something I have any particular knowledge about.
So then don't say I don't know more than you, like you did before.
Well, I didn't say that.
Yes,
I said there are always people who know more about a subject than other people.
Okay, that's not all you said. I was mentioning how I knew more than everybody in Nemesis that I've talked to, and you said
I'm sure you have specialist knowledge in certain subjects that's greater than theirs, and they do it in subjects greater than you.
Well, they haven't shown me to me yet. So here's the thing: I'm giving you 1 minute to prove me wrong in one thing Mary Schweitzer said. Go ahead.
Okay, so one of your arguments with Mary Schweitzer is this thing of the half-lives and 200-fold and all that sort of thing. What that doesn't show is that they have to be that old. It shows that that's as long as we can preserve things for. That doesn't mean nature can't do better than us, as it does in so many things.
Now what?
So, if am I okay to use an analogy here?
No, just repeat that.
Okay, so you say Mary Schweitzer's paper says they did tests on various things for the half-lives, collagen in this case, and you used the 117-year half-life going to 2,000-fold.
No,
to be 250,000 years.
No, that's not what I said. I said, first of all, she didn't test collagen necessarily. She tested blood proteins. Now, she might have tested vascular collagen, but collagen.
Yes, but I was talking about the half-lives that you were talking about.
Yeah. The half-lives, what I was trying to do is give you the as much leeway, as much as an advantage as I possibly could.
Yeah. So she's got a preservation method that can make things last 200 times longer, basically.
200-fold, yes. Yeah. Now, on the other hand,
so that gives 250,000 years for collagen with 117-year lifespan, half-life. Sorry. Yeah.
117-year.
Yeah.
Okay. Half-life.
So from that, using that method on collagen, we can make it last 250,000 years. We think, hypothetically, I mean theoretically, because 250,000 years to test it.
234, yeah.
Yeah. All that shows is that's what we're capable of right now.
That's right. So
it doesn't say that nature can't make things.
Okay. Well, here's my point, Vincent. You can't say we can make it last even 1,000,000 years. You have to accept, if you love science, if you're going to defend science, then you have to admit that's the longest we've been able to preserve it, period. We may not be able to preserve it any longer.
I don't disagree. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying we've done that, and that's the technology we have.
We also have
doesn't mean
but
that
we also
can't do more.
But we also, you see, you're looking at this by itself. We also have.
Now I'm looking at how many other things nature can do better than us.
Hold on. we also have C14, and you're just completely blowing that off. The C14 tests on these scores of dinosaur bones from all around the world. What's that?
Most of which had been preserved.
Well, I don't know what you're even talking about there. But the C14, hold on.
That we have around the world.
Hold on.
That are preserved to keep them.
No, that's not what I'm talking about.
So you're not talking about the dinosaur bones that we have.
No. You're totally screwing up what I'm saying here. These are two different things, okay? The preservation of collagen and vascular tissues and red blood cells and degraded DNA is completely different from C14, okay? C14 should not be existent in these dinosaur bones. Mary Schweitzer says that even these vascular tissues and etc., it's impossible for them to even be 1,000,000 years old. She didn't understand that. And then she ran her test, and sure enough, wow, voila, there you have it, 234,000 years at the uppermost limit. Then, because of that, some groups of people got together and they did the C14 tests. Mm-hmm. So the C14 tests, every single one came back saying that, look, this is only between 9,000 and 40,000 years old at the oldest. So there you have two lines of science saying that these dinosaurs. Hold on.
So can you post a link to the papers for those?
What?
You're talking about the C14 tests of dinosaur bones. Can you post the links to the papers so I can read up on them? Because that's not, unless it's the RATE project, then I'm not aware of any of those. Oops, wrong one, Eric. So anyway, no, what I was saying about the preservation of dinosaur bones is that to keep them, we quite often will coat them in things like shellac, which is obviously an organic compound. And that quite often causes errors in C14 testing.
No, this is something.
That's why I wanted to see the papers.
No. As a matter of fact, I'm going to show you this. Yeah, there are literally dozens of papers. As a matter of fact, they took these papers and they took them to a conference. And the conference that they took them to wouldn't let them speak. And they came out. That's not even science. And then we have asked Bob Enyart. It's on radio. Bob Enyart asked, if we give you $10,000, will you allow us to test that dinosaur bone, the T-Rex bone? Mr. Horner said, no, we won't. How about if we give you $20,000? No, we won't. Because of the spin that Christians are going to get from this. In other words, he already knew it was going to test young. And he wanted to cease from science and not practice science anymore because of the spin that we're going to get. Now, this is Mary's paper right
unless
here.
He had a did he say what reason he had for that?
Yeah, because of the spin that Christians, creationists, will get from the results. That is not science.
Why the results would be those?
Well, he obviously knew they would. Let me show you this.
Well, this is why I'm asking, because, as I say, I know of these preservation methods they use for dinosaur bones to keep them intact. They use shellac.
You see,
organic compounds that contain C14.
That's not so in this
That's
case.
why I'm asking, because I'd like to
see when they
whether they covered that.
Do you know the story behind how they found the soft tissues there in the first place?
Yes.
How?
I've read up on
how
quite extensively.
Well, how? I'll let you tell me.
She did slices of bone and found them under a microscope. And Horner said, "Show me it's not biological."
Do what now? How did they get the bone? How did they get it to the lab?
I have no idea offhand.
Well, you see, that's what I'm talking about. Do you know the story of it? That's what I was asking. No. Mary Schweitzer happened to be on that dig. The only way they could get these T-Rex bones out of there was through helicopter, and they wouldn't all fit in the helicopter. So they had to actually break this T-Rex leg bone. And when they broke the bone, they had little pieces of it here and there. And Mary started to test that, dissolve the matrix, dissolve the bone. Now, do you know what it's made of?
What's made of?
The bone.
Or
that particular.
If it's a fossil, then it will be made of some kind of stone.
Well, this is made of the very same thing bone is made of. So there's that's exactly what it meant.
Carbonate.
Exactly. And that is what Mr. Horner admits to. Not only that, but he said that I'm not going to test those bones for you guys because of the spin you're going to get from it. So anyway, they take this bone to the lab, take it straight to the lab. It's not been treated with anything. She dissolves some of the matrix, and guess what they find? Blood vessels. And these blood vessels...
Well, bits of collagen and stuff.
And that's not all they found. I've got the pictures here. I can pull up the pictures for you right now.
Are you talking about the 2005 paper or the later one she did?
I'm going to pull up what she actually found. Okay, this red image here is one of the things that they found. And this is a red, stretchy material here. These materials are something else that they found. These are actual blood veins.
Yeah, these are the micrometer length pieces they found, yeah.
And you can see within these blood veins the little red blood cell-like structures within the tracts of these blood veins. So, at any rate, that's what they found. Now, then we go. Hold on. Let me pull something else up over here for you now. Now, after these groups of scientists had all of these dozens of dinosaur bones, scores and scores of samples sent to several different laboratories from several different dinosaurs, from several different digs, from several different places, every single one of them came back rich in C14. Now, on one hand, I can pull up a paper over here that shows you, yes, creationists want to keep attacking C14, but it's the most accurate dating method that we have. But then over here in this paper that was drawn up by an atheist and evolutionist, talking about all
as accurate as its application, surely.
Talking about all of these bones that were found rich in C14, the recent discovery of radiocarbon in dinosaur bone. Now, this is written by an atheist, an evolutionist, The recent discovery of radiocarbon in dinosaur bones at first seems incompatible with an age of millions of years. He is admitting that all of these dinosaur bones are coming up C14 rich. All of them. Every single one of them. But look down here. Bone material, fossil or otherwise, is a material that cannot yield an accurate radiocarbon date, except under extraordinary certain circumstances. Uh-oh. So C14 is accurate in everything but dinosaur bones. Mesozoic.
No, it's inaccurate in several things.
Mesozoic bone consistently yields a falsely young radiocarbon date. So because, you see, he's the one throwing spin on this. It's not the creationist. The creationist says, look, the bone is testing young over here in Mary Schweitzer's tests under 250,000 years old. And then every single one of these bones are testing young in these C14 tests. Between 9 and 40,000 years. We're the ones that are accepting the data. You're the ones that's saying, well, C14 is accurate with everything but these dinosaur bones. And believe me, just because they're saying they're only a few thousand to tens of thousands of years old, despite what they say, we know that it is, in fact, millions of years old. No, they don't know that. Do you know how radiometric tests are done?
Well, yes.
Tell me about uranium lead, for instance.
It's done by testing the ratio of the parent to the child.
Well, how do you know which element to use to radiodate something, to do the radiometric dating on it?
Because we can get a reasonable idea for using other methods.
No, I'm asking you, how do you know?
Whether you do geological examination of a particular layer and say it was laid down by that. You know, we have found other things in it that date it to a particular period. We've got an approximate age, and then we can.
You don't understand. You don't understand. You don't understand what I'm asking. How do you know which isotope to use to radiodate something? Radiometrically date it.
Well, I've just said you get an estimate of what you think the age probably is, and use the most appropriate one.
Oh, so you have to guess the age of that rock before you know. Estimate. Before you, like, for instance, before you radio test a rock using the uranium lead method, you've got to assume that that rock is at least 10 million years old.
Yeah.
That's not science.
Okay, let's go with that.
That's presupposition. That's not science. Now,
well, of course it is. Science makes a lot of assumptions.
When you presuppose that rock is 10 million years old at least, and then you run actual tests on the things that are found within that bone that's supposed to be in a rock that's 110 million years old or 88 million years old or 66 million years, because you assumed it was over 10 million years. And yet the materials within that rock, after they test it to see how long they could possibly preserve it, the longest you can get is 234,000 years, as far as we know, as far as the testing proves. And then you run other tests that say, look, it's not even that old. It's between 9 and 40,000 years old, every single one of these. Then you have to imagine, you have to ask yourself, well, is my presupposition wrong? And if you don't at least ask that and consider that as a possibility, you are biased. You are not practicing science. You are protecting a paradigm.
And they usually do. It's been through all that kind of testing
and
examination. We have we have knowledge of several things that we know are fairly recent, but test wrongly with things like carbon-14. shells from sea creatures.
No, you are totally blowing off everything that I just said, Vincent. You're completely blowing off everything that I just said. I said if you're going to, so if you're going to presuppose that a rock is 10 million years old before you even test it, then you have to ask yourself, is my presupposition incorrect? When you have all these other tests coming back saying, no, this isn't even 40,000 years old. This is between 9 and 40,000 years old. Now, when you have all these tests saying it can't even be 250,000 years old, it can't even be any more than 9 to 40,000 years old. You have these tests saying that. Then you have two lines of tests that are saying your presupposition is wrong. And but then
those presuppositions don't come from nowhere, do they?
Well, yeah, they pretty much do. They come from hypotheses, hypothetically assuming a deep time with these dinosaur bones. That's where it's coming from.
They're built on a range of other methods that have been used to determine those ages.
No, it hasn't.
We can work backwards.
No, it hasn't.
So we can
it hasn't.
Say dendrochronology to get an idea of things from the last, what is it, about 9,500 years they go back now?
I'm talking about deep time, and I'm talking about
I'm just saying that we base things on other things. So we can use things like dendrochronology to go back a certain length of time, and then we can look at other methods that overlap with that and test.
Okay, well,
match with the bit they overlap, and if they do, then it's a reasonable assumption that it'll continue being valid.
Okay, so
in other words,
I'm going to ask one more time then. So you can't prove that anything I said about Mary Schweitzer is wrong.
Well, I just did.
About what?
About your assumption that the methods we use to preserve things are as limited as nature's is.
What?
Just because we can.
No, I'm asking you. I'm not asking you to explain away what Mary Schweitzer found out through testing. I'm asking you, can you prove anything I said about Mary Schweitzer to be wrong?
Well, when you say that her preservation methodology gives a hard limit on preservation.
Did I say it gave a hard limit? Yes. No, I did not. As a matter of fact, if you watch the things that I've said about that, I said, now, can they come about anything, another way of preserving these things miraculously for 65 million years? No.
Not yet.
So
we've only just started doing that kind of experimentation.
What?
We've only just started on that kind of experimentation. It's only been in the last 20 years that we've been experimenting.
And look at the technology. Look at the technology. Kind of yes. And that's the best we have. Okay.
At the moment, yes.
So quit misrepresenting me and strawmanning me. I did not say.
You've said a couple of times.
I did not say, sir. I did not say that in the future we can never come up with anything longer. This is a hard line. All I have said is, and you're the one that doesn't want to stick with the facts, Vincent. You're the one that doesn't want to accept that what we have is 234,000 years, and that maybe your dating method is wrong. Maybe your dating methods with uranium lead.
A couple of times is
and now I've also said
can't be any older than that.
That's right. That's what we've proven so far.
It proves
what we have proven.
Things that long.
What we have proven. What we have proven so far is that there is no other test whatsoever ever done by anybody anywhere that proves you can preserve these things more than 200-fold. And a 200-fold increase only gives us 234,000 years. But then when you mix that with the carbon-14 tests, then we have another line of science saying they are between 9,000 and 40,000 years old. That's what I'm saying.
And we're aware that small amounts of impurities.
What I'm saying is, see, then we shouldn't trust carbon-14 in anything then, according to you. If you're just going to throw that away, you're just going to throw that away, Vincent. You don't care what the tests say.
I'm saying we have to use the method properly.
No. You're just going to throw it away.
Test the shells of sea creatures.
You're just going to throw it away.
So we need to know the limitations.
You're just going to throw it
do
away.
The method properly.
You're throwing away
I'm not
both
throwing it away.
tests.
It's perfectly valid if we do it right.
Okay, so
Within
you're going to throw away both tests and say it's irresponsible to believe that these things can be.
Either.
Oh, well, do you believe it is?
Do I believe it's irresponsible to throw the tests away? Yes.
Okay. Do you believe it's irresponsible to believe that these bones may not be over 40,000 years old?
I think it's a reasonable hypothesis to take.
Okay. So
because
then
that's how science works through falsification. So we say, okay, let's assume it's younger than that. What other methodology can we use to determine that? And either refute ourselves or prove it.
So you agree with me that so far it's reasonable to believe that these bones are under 40,000 years old?
No, it's reasonable to accept that and test for it.
So it's reasonable.
And if we can find reasons why they might be compromised.
Okay.
Now, as I say, we know there are things that compromise it.
Now,
and even a tiny amount
when we
of carbon-14 being brought in from somewhere else can cause a 40,000 year date, because that's when there's the tiniest amount left.
When we look then at what we know about the recent history of the Earth, the Younger Dryas era. The Younger Dryas is the only era in which all of a sudden in recent history 400 feet was added to the sea level, roughly 400 feet. It's the only era that we see where we had massive flooding.
Well, no, there's been several floods in the past, but that's the most recent one.
I'm talking about during the Younger Dryas.
Yeah, I'm saying that's the most recent of those kind of global events.
No. And then if we take...
Well, that's as much as I know about it, so I can't really discuss it intelligently.
Okay. Right. So then when we take what science has given us so far through the dating of these soft tissues, which says, okay, so far we can only prove that the oldest these can be is 234,000 years old. And then you take the C14 that says every single one of these tests between 9 and 40,000 years old. Then you look at recent history and you say the Younger Dryas is the only era that would fit this, that would actually fossilize these bones, that would actually carry them, sweep them away. Now, do you know anything about the Morrison formation?
The Morrison Foundation, as I recall, is a very thin layer that they found. I'm trying to remember where. I can't remember offhand. I know a little bit about it, but again, not enough to actually intelligently discuss it.
The Morrison Formation is just one of many huge fossil beds, and it lies in a huge floodplain in the middle of the United States. It takes up 14 states and goes into 2 Canadian provinces. And it has several things in common with every other huge, massive fossil bed found in Europe, North America, South America, China, Russia. Has several things in common with these. For instance, in all of these various fossil beds that take up massive areas of floodplains, these were all swept together in a jumble of bones. Once in a while, you'll find a whole body, but most of them are disarticulated bones. They underwent some kind of a violent force. And they were obviously in a flood. They were washed together in all these various fossil beds that take up such huge areas. And they are admitted to, yes, these bones were washed together. Some violent force tore them apart, these bodies, and washed them together. And some of them are whole. And then they have something else in common. The dinosaur death pose. In the dinosaur death pose, you have the head arched back, and then there's papers proving that this was done by flooding. This was done by a water force, a huge force. And then we see that at the same time, some people want to say that the United States was covered with an inland sea. So, and this inland sea happens to be in the exact same spot this Morrison Formation is in. So these dinosaurs were found swept together in what they say was an inland sea and not a massive flood. So what that means is, according to these people that want to write off the massive flood and say this was just an inland sea, apparently all these birds and pterodactyls and ocean life that's mixed in with it, and dinosaurs and mammals and reptiles, all swam out to the middle of this inland sea, or flew out to this inland sea, or caught a ride somewhere, and they buried themselves in hundreds of feet of silt in the middle of this inland sea. And they just drowned themselves. I guess they were depressed or something. So that's the lengths they want to go to try to deny a global flood. So, what we look at is all of these things fit with the Younger Dryas era, all of this flooding, all of this washing together with a violent force. Then what they're found in, marine sandstone and limestone. Limestone is made from marine life. Yet these dinosaurs, many of them are buried in limestone. So what is limestone? Well, it's tiny, crushed marine shells and skeletons. Now, they say that at the same time that the dinosaurs existed, Pangea existed. So if you have a global flood, and it was just 12,000 years ago, you don't have 7 continents. You've only got one that you've got to worry about. And all of these seismic elements would have sloshed the water back and forth. And if you read these scientific papers on these fossils, I can show you the claims that water flooded, sloshing back and forth across the continent. And that all of this continent of Pangea was flooded at one time or another during this 250 million year period that now you have to put into the Younger Dryas era, which was a very short period of time, which then interprets it to be a global flood. We have a totally different story. Now, catastrophism used to be what most of the world believed. Most of the world believed in catastrophism, and gradualism didn't occur as a widespread belief until the advent of Darwin, who used gradualism to explain evolution. Because you need gradualism to explain evolution. You have to make it so far, so long that nobody can ever observe it. And then, if you cram all of that, if you take that all away, and you say, okay, let's go back with the catastrophists, and let's put this back in the Younger Dryas area, then all of these incidents that they say occurred over a 200 million year period happen in a period of weeks or months at the most. So there you have evidence of a global flood. And it happens to be that when Plato talked about the sinking of Atlantis, Plato lived like 2,000 years ago. And he said that the sinking of Atlantis happened 9,000 years before him, which puts it in the Younger Dryas area. Right about the time that we're talking about, a great massive flood. And then you look at the stories worldwide about all these floods that each and every one of us tell us. According to them, it was in their deep time, way back in time, thousands of years ago. Not millions of years ago, but thousands. So all of these things converge. You talk about convergent evolution. Well, all of these things converge to tell us that this happened recently. All of these things converge together. And when you have that, Vincent, you have reasonable evidence for God. Just like you have reasonable evidence for God with biogenesis and astrophysics. All of these things give us reasonable evidence for God. And then when you factor in people's personal experience with God, actually knowing God, you have even more reasonable evidence for God. That's all I'm saying. That it's not unreasonable, Vincent, to believe that there's a God, to know that there's a God. It's not unreasonable at all. And science allows for that.
The problem I have is that a lot of what you were doing then is cherry picking. You're picking a particular result or set of results and saying that they invalidate other results.
Well, they obviously do. Now, if you're going to say that the C4...
But if you have two sets of results...
Hold on.
And they contradict...
Yeah.
Then how do you determine which is correct?
Then you bring in the third set of results that say your radiometric dating and assuming that that rock is at least 10 million years old when you test it is wrong. You bring in all of these lines of science that tell you that.
So you're
you see, you only have
validating the methods that they used to determine those ages originally.
No, you only have one line of evidence saying that all of this happened tens of millions of years ago. Just one.
No.
Yes, you do. That's your radiometric dating. That's it. Then you have all of these other lines of science saying, no, it's younger than that, Vincent.
Well, not really, no. Because you're only choosing specific results.
No.
From within those. And saying that the others aren't valid.
And all of these.
You could equally as much take the ones that you reject and say these are valid, and it invalidates the other ones.
No. One doesn't invalidate all the rest. All of the rest invalidate.
That's what I'm saying. So you're taking
all of the rest invalidate the one, or at least make it reasonable to believe that your one is invalidated.
Well, no, because you're
not
claiming the assumptions.
No, you're hoping and praying, dude. You're saying you're going to hang on to this stubbornly and say, my one line of radiometric dating.
It's not just one.
Yeah, boy, yes, it is. My one line of science, radiometric dating, where I have to assume the age of all these rocks before I test them.
No, it's not just radiometric dating, is it?
Yeah.
It's things like ice cores.
That's still radiometric dating, dude. You're still using...
Ice cores aren't.
You're still using...
Ice cores is like dendrochronology. You're counting layers.
You are still using radiometric dating for all of that.
No, it's not radiometric.
Do you even understand what I'm saying, Vincent? How do they date ice cores? You seem to be saying
that counting layers
is
radiometric dating.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, for one thing, for instance, in a layer of ice that was supposed to be tens of millions of years old, they found an airplane.
They did.
Yes, they did.
In very fast laying conditions.
But it was supposed to have been tens of millions of years old.
It wasn't supposed to be.
Yes, it was in that particular
known situation.
No, the airplane was known. Yes. And boy were they red faced when they found the plane, because it was found.
The weather laid down lots of snow. But in a layer, in the center of where they don't get that weather.
In a layer where they said was tens of millions of years old. Now, that's the truth. Now, also, here's what you're doing, dude. You're taking one line of science and you're saying that outrules everything. That overrules everything. It don't matter if we have 10 other methods here telling that this stuff is young. My one line of science, radiometric dating, says no, it's not. You see, they radiometrically test some of the stuff in these ice cores to get an approximate age. If you don't know that, then you don't know anything about ice cores. So they're still using the radiometric dating. And just counting layers just counting layers doesn't work, because you can have hundreds of layers laid down in a single year. well, scores, maybe not hundreds, but scores.
Several such. It doesn't happen.
Yes, it does happen. It happens all the time. Every new snowfall, every new significant snowfall lays down a new layer.
Which is why they do it in the center of Antarctica.
And they have
a rare occurrence. It only happens yearly.
That is not a rare occurrence. It happens every freaking day.
The layers only get laid down each year.
No, that is
because
not
they
true.
They freeze over.
You really need to. That is just not true.
Once a year.
Prove that.
I'll have to find it for next time, Eric.
Yeah, well, you can't. That's something you can't prove. You see, what I can prove is that during any particular year, you have many, many different layers of ice laid down per year with every significant snowfall. So, quit reaching and quit trying to pretend, Vincent, that it's unreasonable to believe in God. It's not. We have plenty of scientific evidence that points to God. And you're just stubborn, dude. You just want to come back with no but, no but, no but. It is reasonable to follow these sciences and end up with the conclusion that, yes, there is a God. It's even more reasonable to commune with God, to have a relationship with him, and to say, yes, I know there is a God. And I commune with God, Vincent. Now, you can say I'm insane. Okay. Well, if I'm insane, why am I the one that's accepting these testings that conflict with all of these other radiometric tests that are saying that you believe in? You believe in these radiometric tests despite the fact that they're being proven wrong. You believe in abiogenesis in spite of the fact that Biogenesis says it takes a life to create a life.
But that doesn't refute abiogenesis.
But you believe in abiogenesis despite the fact it's never been proven. You call it natural despite the fact that nature proves otherwise. It's not natural.
Well, nature doesn't prove otherwise.
Nature proves otherwise.
Biogenesis does
what
not
is natural, what
nature
proves is that a life brings forth life, and consciousness and intelligence.
It does. Life does bring forth life.
Therefore,
but that doesn't refute
consciousness and they bring forth after their own kind.
But that doesn't refute abiogenesis.
Well, actually, it does. It refutes. Of course, it does, because you never see abiogenesis occurring. What refutes abiogenesis?
We don't see it now. No.
There you go. We don't see it now, but I know it happened because we have life.
Yeah.
You see, now that's ridiculous. You sound like a poor, hopeless child right now, Vincent. We know.
Really, if you see a house,
I've got to believe
and
that
a year ago it was painted white. You know that someone painted the house.
Yes.
So if you see no life in the past and then see life,
then you know somebody created life.
But there's no evidence.
Then you know somebody created that life. Just like you said, you just said you know somebody painted that house.
Yeah. The house
so you concede the fact.
See the act.
So you concede. There you go. So now you concede the fact. You can see the act of life being created.
Of abiogenesis occurring.
No. Of life being created.
All we can say
wait. In 1 minute, you're saying you see that somebody painted this house.
Yes.
You see that house was. Hold on.
That's their breaking point.
Okay. Well, hold on just a second. I'm going to make my point here. What we have here is Vincent making a point. Vincent's point is, I see this house is white. I come back a year later, I see the house is blue. My conclusion, somebody painted that house blue because it's not a natural act for that house to paint itself blue. But now he's saying, we notice that it only takes life. Only life can bring forth life. We know this. That's what we observe. That's the only thing we observe, is life bringing forth life. We never observe abiogenesis occurring. Therefore, when I see life, and I know it's a natural act that life creates life, then I'm going to assume anyway that abiogenesis occurred and non-living entities just suddenly evolved and sprang forth into life. I'm going to assume that the unnatural occurred, the thing that we never observe, even though I'm going to assume somebody painted that house blue. I'm not going to assume that something created that life. So he wants to assume creation in the case of the house, but he wants to deny creation in the case of life. Now, what's easier? What's easier? For a house to paint itself blue, or for life just to spring from non-life? Which is the most impossible? Which is the most unlikely? They're both unlikely. What we have to assume then is what we observe is what's natural. What we observe in nature is what's natural. We have to observe that just like the house didn't paint itself blue, but it took a life, it took a creator, it took a painter to turn it from white to blue. Then it takes a creator to create a life. One is no more improbable than the other. It's just as improbable that life came from non-life as it is that that house painted itself blue. So I gave Vincent another half an hour to prove anything wrong that I said. Vincent, you're asking for more time. I gave you a half an hour to prove anything that I said wrong from Mary Schweitzer. I asked, can you prove anything I said about? I said wrong. You said Mary Schweitzer. And yet you can't prove anything that I said wrong. You just tried to straw man me. That's all you try to do. And yet none of the facts that I presented have you been able to prove wrong. Not a single one, Vincent. Now, we've been going at this for 3.5 hours. He says, I successfully showed that your interpretation was inaccurate. No, you didn't. You successfully showed that you're willing to live by a double standard. You're willing to believe that that house didn't paint itself blue. But yet you're going to swear up and down that because life exists, abiogenesis, the unnatural act that we never observe, has been proven true. No, my friend, it's failed in its absolutely every single attempt. Absolutely every single one. Now, we've been at this for 3.5 hours. It is time to go, my friends. If you can't prove anything that I've said wrong, not a single one of you, then live with it. If you don't want to admit that it's reasonable to believe in God, that's fine. But you're still going to live with the fact that you haven't been able to prove a single thing I've said to be wrong. You're just proving that you're not reasonable. You're more reasonable to say, yeah, but all of these things are natural, and that's what we observe, but We still see there's life, so the unnatural, the thing that we never observed, had to have happened. And life, that one instance, is not what brought forth life. That one single solitary incident, even though we've never been able to recreate it in the lab or observe it in nature. With that, my friends, there's only a few of you left. I thank you very much for sticking with this. God bless you all. I love you all. Vincent, I love you too, man. But that's it, bud. You had your chance to prove that I was wrong about something, and you're hanging on wishes and hopes. You're hanging on wishes and hopes so you can simply say it's not reasonable to believe in God. Despite all these lines of science. Until next time, my friend. We will continue our discussion sometime. I'll give you a fair amount of time to prove me wrong. And I'll accept that too. Maybe you're an agnostic. But if you're an agnostic, you ought to at least be able to say, all these things make it reasonable to believe in a God. If you're not going to claim atheism, then you should at least be able to make that concession. Be honest with your friends. Don't be afraid to make an honest admission in front of your friends that all these things make it reasonable to believe that there is a God. Let me see turn the tide on them and say, yeah, it's not unreasonable at all. He has some points. If you do that, if you make that move, Vincent, I'll be impressed. And I mean that sincerely. And with that being said, no problem. No harm. I have nothing against any of you. I really don't. I really do hope the very best for every single one of you. God bless you all. This is Eric, a.k.a. Wolfman. Maybe I have a high credibility threshold that requires extraordinary evidence. Well, you should be that way for both sides, dude. Why aren't you that way for both sides? Because you're afraid? Are you afraid of what your friends may say? Because you make the honest concession. He has some points. It's not unreasonable to believe in God. All these things can be looked at and said, yes, there is a God. You are what, afraid? You're afraid to say that to your friends, Vincent? Are you afraid to admit that it's reasonable to believe in God? If you're going to require extraordinary evidence, require that too from the atheists, the evolutionists that are telling you dinosaurs died tens of millions of years ago. When you have all these lines of evidence, plus eyewitness accounts that we see in the world saying that these things walked with man, and they died out just thousands of years ago. Why is your science one-sided? I don't know, but it is. I really think you are afraid. I think you're afraid. You're just as skeptical with all. No, you're not. Vincent, I'm going to call BS on that claim. You're not skeptical when they tell you dinosaurs died out 65 million years ago. Because you fight it tooth and nail. The evidence that proves contrary. You already admitted that these guys assumed the age of a rock before they even dated. Vincent, have a great day, buddy. And God bless you all. This is Eric, a.k.a. Wolfbitten. This was a nice discussion. I do hope that I've given him and Kirsten something to think about. Good night, folks. Nemesis, good night. And live with the fact that not one thing I've been able to say has been proven wrong. Not one. By any of you. God bless and have a good night. Eric, a.k.a. Wolfbitten. I love you very much. We will see you